Greetings, Astrolabians, one and all. Welcome to the Astrolabe. Brought to you by King Pilled. This episode is sponsored by the King Pilled Discord. You can join by going to kingpilled.com and become one of the esteemed members of the greatest secret society on the internet, the members of the King Pilled Discord. That's the best way you can support the show if you like what I'm doing here. If this is your first time listening, you may not know if the show is worth supporting. We'll find out here over the next probably hour and a half or 2 hours. Hopefully it is. The other ways you can support, you can send a super chat. You can, Taylor Brown says join the Discord. That's right. Join the Discord. Join us. You can also send a super chat. You can, there's a couple links in the description as well. Get the housekeeping out of the way right away. There's a Cash App link and buymeacoffee.com/kingpilled. You can also sign up over on the King Pilled Substack. There you could subscribe for free. There's a paid option. You don't get anything special for it right now. It's just something I opened up as for people who want to support. If you'd like, after this episode is over, I will be getting this posted on the Substack, which will push it out to all of the podcatchers. And it'll also have all of the links that I go through today. I've got 3 windows worth of tabs, but honestly, I don't think it's that much. We're going to spend a while on a couple of subjects, though. Number one, shout out to Philo's Miscellany. He went through and summarized, with the help of AI, I imagine, he summarized every single executive order that Trump has issued so far. And we're going to go through them. There's a list of all of them in order and a description. We're going to go through them, and we're going to concentrate on a couple in particular. We're going to look at the actual Doge structure, which is very, very interesting. All the people who've said the Doge, they think the Doge isn't going to accomplish much. It's going to accomplish much. If anything, like, my concern with the Doge is that it's going to accomplish too much, frankly. We'll get into that. I'll explain what I mean with that once we get rocking and rolling here. But also, we're tracking the developments in the man who was once known as Little Marco. And on his current trajectory, I'm beginning to think that we need to propose that he be renamed Big Marco, because he's doing some big stuff. Also, Curtis Yarvin was on the New York Times. That is the extent to which we are winning. Curtis Yarvin is being interviewed by the New York Times. Now, it wasn't an extremely satisfying interview. It was very obviously not an interview that the New York Times wanted to do, but it's a signal of just how far we've come. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. Marco Grande. Yeah, there you go. Marco Grande. I like that. Oh, Mega Marco. Okay, you guys got to duke it out now. You got to figure out which one's going to be the winner here, because I like Mega Marco and I like Marco Grande. I think those are both very good. Mega Marco. I guess that might be saying it might sound a little too much like you're saying Maga Marco, which is not something that. I guess he's Mega Marco, but it sends a different idea. Elon Musk is out tweeting "Mega, make Europe great again," which is feeding into my theory that the United States is about to colonize Europe. We're going to do it for your own good. You might joke, but I think there may be some reality to that. All right, so I'm going to go through. A guy did an interesting thread breaking down the Yarvin on New York Times interview, and made some good points. And it has a bunch of clips in there, so we'll go through that. So you don't necessarily have to go give the New York Times a click if you don't want to. I did, but yeah. And then I've got a bunch of scattered little thoughts here and there that should be a jumping off for. They're either just good thoughts I wanted to share with you, or they're jumping off for good comments. All right, do me a favor, hit the like button. We got 71 in here now, but only 19 likes. Oh, it dropped to 69. I said it. They just wanted to give me the nice number. Do me a favor and hit the like button, and tell the algorithm that you like what you hear. Even if you don't, tell it anyways. The algorithm doesn't know if you're lying. $10 super chat right out the gate from Michael Robertson. Thank you, sir. He says, guys, please make sure to hug your local librarian. And I don't know if that typo was intentional, but I'm going to roll with it. Please make sure to hug your local librarian and congratulate them on their first and only W. They really needed that one after this year. Congrats, Ross. Yes, just before I went live here. No, leave it. Librarian. It was perfect. Just before I went live here, Trump posted that he is pardoning Ross Ulbricht. So really, it's not the Libertarians. Libertarians don't deserve any credit for it. Dave Smith and Angela McArdle. They're the ones who deserve the credit for this happening. The funny thing is when Trump tweeted out, or it was his Truth Social post, misspelled his name, spelled it Ross Albright instead of Ulbricht. But I just tweeted that my headcanon is going to say that he did that on purpose. They intentionally misspelled it. It's like a little kind of inconsequential error, but it's going to make the autists just fucking spurg out. And so this was like one last little middle finger to him for booing him at the LNC and then spurging out over the last few months. And here he is. He said, "I will pardon him on day one." And this is effectively day one. He pardoned him within the first 24 hours. It's good news. I think Ross deserves to be out. The case, from everything I've seen, the case was overblown. I've seen some people who've made a case that he did definitely do some stuff that merited some time at least. And so at this point, it's like, okay, well, he did some time. So even if you think he did deserve to do time for whatever reason, he's done time. And he spent, if I understand right, I think he spent a lot of it in solitary confinement. So like, he's done his time. Even if you think he actually should have been criminally liable for something that he did. All right, so he did his time, and now he gets to be out. I'm looking forward to the Ross Ulbricht Joe Rogan interview. I think that's going to be that's probably going to be worth the listen. I also wonder if, unironically, I wonder to what extent they're planning on hiring him or employing him in some way. That could play a role and could have played a role in convincing Trump to pardon him. That you might maybe his services might come of use. That is definitely the direction that things are heading. Damn it, Jeremy says he's a longtime Spotify listener, first time live stream watcher. Welcome, sir. Hello, Jeremy. What is the AA thing? Hi, Jeremy. My name is Jeremy, and I have a problem. Hi, Jeremy. Welcome the man to the live chat. Give him the full live chat experience. All right, we got to start it off with a banger. Got to have some lighthearted, fun, inspiring, hype up clips. Little remix here from Red 5D Jedi. Did I do this before? Red 5 seems to be Red 5. Red 5D Jedi, maybe 5D chess. Anyways, one of the best mix makers. You guys have definitely seen his stuff. I've played his clips on here before. He made a little remix just for fun.
If you want to really see something that said, take a look what happened. We will make America proud again. We will make America wealthy again. And yes, together, we will make America great again.
It's a banger. It's a banger. I've had that song stuck in my head the rest of all day today. What was this, January 20? I must have saved it early this morning, and just had it in my, had it stuck in my head all afternoon. And there we went and demonetized the stream immediately at the very beginning. Wyman is in the chat. Uh-oh, guys. The schizo quotient just went way up. We love our schizo boy. He says, where's our favorite DEI homo co-host? It's a very good question. Where is Cooper? Well, I know that Cooper doesn't believe in the internet anymore. He believes in driving his truck, spending time with his family, and occasionally dropping in to the Discord to present his thoughts. He's doing well. He said that he deleted Twitter off of his phone, and he deleted Twitter off of his phone, and he said the first couple of days he counted like 40 times that he pulled his phone out and swiped over to go open Twitter. And It took him like a few days to get out of that general habit, and but now he said he just feels better. And it's funny because it means that he doesn't get to witness the fruits of our labor. We put a lot of time and thought into our critique of Mr. Zero HP Lovecraft. We dubbed him the Chief of the Goonics, and then shortly after, he disappeared, just vanished completely. And then he came back, and he's been really good. He's been making really, really good points, talking about how people should not get so bent out of shape about politics, and we need to focus on building. What's happening? There was a conspiracy theory put forth in the King Pill Discord as to what prompted this change of tune from that account. I will neither confirm nor deny. Okay. This man is just living the best life. He's trained with the blade. And I saw Indian Bronson tweet just a little while ago that he talked to someone who's very, very close to Trump. And he said, you would not be able to comprehend the amount of sleep that he's gotten since, I can't remember the timeline he gave. It was up until this point. So maybe he went and got some sleep last night. I don't know. But he has apparently been running on an unfathomably low level of sleep. And he's been known to not be a big sleeper. He sleeps like 4 hours a night and is just a low-need sleeper. I am not a low-need sleeper. If I was to sleep 4 hours a night for, I don't know, after about 2 or 3 days, I will just, I will completely melt down. My brain will stop working. My body will stop working. I will not function. I'm a high-need sleeper. I love my sleep. I've always loved sleep. But our president, fortunately, this is why I wouldn't make a good president. I need to sleep too much. What's that? Nuclear launch? Get back to me after my alarm goes off. But our president is a high performer. He is the very definition of high energy. And this video clip last night was just, this is the perfect capper of an amazing day. The first day of the golden age, the new golden age. Look at this man.
Thank you all very much.
Both of our boys, both of them here. Now, my wife pointed out that JD being in the Marines means he probably knows his way around. He's carried it at least before. He's carried a sword. It's not the first time that he's held one. But as you notice throughout this clip, you can hear the song that's coming. As you notice throughout this clip, there's a distinct difference in demeanor between the two of these guys. Watch him. He's like, come on, get your sword, let's go. Come on. He does the Baron. Oh, it's the dance. Melania's laughing. Look at him go! Melania's dancing. Look at... Both of these women, we're absolutely digging this. And it's funny, the first time I saw this, I saw it starting from like, I don't know, like right here. So I didn't see the buildup with JD having the sword. And he goes, get rid of this thing here. So at some point here, so he's holding it. Trump was trying to get him to do it. And I showed this to Amy, and Amy said that Usha probably told him to put the sword away. Like, he's too awkward and goofy, like you're going to hurt yourself. But I think... Where does he put it away? Okay, right here. He goes and he puts it away. And her body language to me tells me she's trying to get him to go out there. Like, she's trying to get him to go dance with Trump. Like, start doing it. And frankly, now I have a lot of respect for Usha. I think she's I know it's not popular to say around here, but she seems like she's an exceptional wife and mother. She's very understated, very professional, very dignified. She's very Melania-like, honestly. She's like just a little bit warmer than Melania, but she's very similar to her. And then this picture here just completely typifies JD. He is peak millennial, bro. He is just the distillation of millennialness. And I think he knew well enough that, number one, this is a big risk. If he goes out and he starts dancing with Trump, that's a huge risk. Because if he does it and looks like a goober, his political career is cooked. He is done. So there's a big risk to it. And frankly, this is Trump's moment. Trump wanted him out there. I'm speculating, but I'm just kind of trying to read the tea leaves here, reading her body language. I think she was trying to push him up there as well. And he's like, no. This is the big guy's moment. Let him have it. Just let him cut loose and just do it. And frankly, there's also probably like I'm not going to go make myself look like a fucking moron out there. Brent Taylor says, but Trump looks like a goober. Yeah, but he could pull it off because he's Trump. I think part of why this stands out to me is because when Trump is gone, JD is clearly the heir apparent right now. I don't think that's set in stone, but as of right now, JD is the heir apparent for inheriting the mantle. And you might say, like, what of his sons? He's really close friends with Don Jr. So Don Jr. would just as soon have his buddy be the president and him just kind of be the stay in the background. And I think Eric would probably have better things to do, and Eric wouldn't. I don't think Eric would be electable. So we're basically running out the clock until Barron becomes an option. So for the time being, JD has the mantle, but he's never going to be Trump. Nobody is ever going to be Trump. So when the crown is passed on, it's going to be a change. We can't help it. And Trump is such a cult of personality, such a singular figure that just defines the personality of the entire administration. And really, he's like the gravity. He's like the thing that the entire culture moves around. So when he passes the crown on to JD, presuming it is JD, then people are saying it's another 17 years for Barron. Barron's too young. I don't know that necessarily is going to matter. We'll just say that. I mean, I don't think you're going to see like President Barron at 24 or something, but I suspect that Barron's time in the spotlight is probably going to come in less than 17 years, whatever that looks like. Anyways, so a lot is going to be asked of JD Vance because he's not a natural entertainer. He's very charismatic. He's a very good communicator, very good at talking, very good at presenting himself, and he can connect with the little guy and speak the big guy's language. So he's very well suited for the position, but the position that he'll be inheriting from Trump is not the same position. Even if he's elected president, he's not going to occupy the same status that Trump has. And a lot of people are going to expect him to, and they're going to be disappointed. So he's going to bear it's kind of like the son having to live up to his father, and he's just not what his father is. That doesn't mean he's not something really good in his own right, but he's not what his father is. He's going to have to navigate that. And I think he's as well equipped as anyone to do that. But these sorts of events here can wind up being extremely significant in setting the stage for what that might look like. How it's gonna pan out. I do think that there's a very good chance that Trump serves another term. I don't think that it's necessarily completely clean cut that 2028 is the end of his time in office. I mean, if the dude's running on virtually no sleep at 78 and he's out here hamming it up and dancing, 4 more years, I think it's entirely possible. So much stuff is changing. I think it's entirely possible that he winds up getting another term. I saw today, right now, Trump's approval rating among Democrats is at 34, which is up from, I don't know what it's been, like 9 to 13, somewhere in that range. And it's at 34 right now. Comprehensive domination. I thought I had another. Maybe I didn't. Oh, I think I might have saved it for tomorrow. So, don't have another video, but another slop video. Reddit is really having a hard time. Something is wrong 2024. We call on Donald Trump to rescind the executive orders and resign, or else we'll all stop paying rent and call in sick. The cavalry isn't coming. That can mean only one thing. This is for action items and organizing. We are the cavalry. The American people have been the cavalry the whole time. Given the surge in awareness around Trump's election interference and the outrageous behavior we're already seeing, why not just demand that Trump rescind all of his executive orders and resign by February 12th, which is Abraham Lincoln's birthday. Resign by February 12th, or we start shutting things down. People stop paying rent. People call in sick. People pull their money out of banks and move it into credit unions en masse. What is the banking system? Pull your money out of the banks and put it into credit unions. Cancel your subscriptions. How long do you think these little queers would last without their Netflix subscription? Whatever. It doesn't require everyone to do all of these things, just enough people doing enough things to freak out the ruling class. A specific demand with a specific timeline with specific actions that anyone can take. Isaac says this was written by one of our guys. And honestly, see, here's the thing about these kinds of posts. I used to sit there and be like, well, maybe this is fake. Maybe somebody's trolling with this. And what came to realize is it doesn't matter. It's real. Because the reason it works for them to do that is because that sentiment is out there. Because they're going to get a bunch of people who are like, yeah, let's do it. And even if that is just a small group of people, they're like, yeah, let's do it. By putting this out here into the ether and having it go viral, having people start talking about it, means that all of the resist Trump people now get lumped into this category. So it's a very effective, psyop, honestly. And this is like our guys are incredibly good at psyops. And meanwhile, this is from Matt Goodwin, author of one of the UK's biggest Substacks, somewhat based. He says, imagine waking up in Britain and reading this, which is the equivalent of what Trump is doing on day one. I'm going to go through this quick because we're going to go through some of these in detail later on. A national border emergency is declared. The military is sent to the channel to stop the boats. A national priority is established to eliminate organized gangs on British soil and designate them terrorists. New powers are granted to allow the swift detain and deportation of anybody entering Britain illegally. All energy constraints, including on North Sea gas and oil, are removed. Net zero is effectively put on pause. Fully reform the state, including making it clear civil servants who fail to comply with the new government will be sacked. Shut down woke ideology in federal institutions and replace hiring with new merit-based hiring review. Force all civil servants back to in-person work. Restore full free speech and end federal censorship. Remove security clearances of any civil servant who is engaged in shutdown of free speech. Establish biological sex differences, brings gender ideology in public institutions to an end. Immediately end all diversity, equity, and inclusion programs across government. Establish a new Department of Government Efficiency and regain centralized control over all NGO funding. Remove all state programs that increase cost of living for British families and consumers. Ugh. That puts it into perspective, or that ought to. Can you imagine how far away the British government is from something like this. And where the British government is effectively where we would have been in very short order under any sort of democratic, and honestly, most Republican other options. And yet, we are on the good timeline. Tom Rickson says, replay gang here. JD was enlisted, so wouldn't have paraded with the sword. He did, however, show his reverence for what the sword represents by handing it over. That shouldn't be expected of Trump. That's a very good point. And also, did you notice Trump was holding that blade? Now, I don't know how sharp those are. I don't know if this is a ceremonial one or if it's part of their if it's like, you know, you keep everything spotless and shiny, and this involves sharpening the sword so it's razor sharp. I don't know. I would believe either one of them. But it must be Tuesday night at 7:00, and I need to take the trash out. But he had his hand wrapped right around that blade, and presumably didn't cut himself at all. So either it's not that sharp, or he has studied the blade. He's got good hand-eye coordination. So the libs are seething and crying on Reddit. The Brits are drifting away into the rearview mirror, and here's Tucker Carlson walking around on the street.
Went to church with Charlie this morning. Hey, good morning. Our country's back, sir. Man, I love it. Happy inaugural. You're a hero.
I love Tucker so much. He deserves this. After all of the abuse and death threats and people showing up at his house and threatening his wife and kids, after everything that he's gone through, he deserves this. Because if you know Tucker, you know how meaningful this is to him. Very personally meaningful to be walking down the street in, I believe this is in D.C., walking down the street, people coming up, saying, like, exulting in the new lease on life that our country has. He is beaming. It could be minus 50 out there, and he would have been glowing. Josh Clemens says, Tucker living in a Christmas movie. It's really good to see. I love, like, beyond politics, I just adore Trump the man. And Tucker is very, very close to that for me. Can't cuck the tuck. That's right. Okay, here's one for you guys. You're going to love this. This is from Bo Erickson at Reuters. He's got this picture. Note here, you've got Barron right here. One of the most interesting tables at the inauguration luncheon is Barron Trump's, with the red arrow. For the last 30 minutes, Jeff Bezos, Senate Majority Leader John Thune, and Secretary of State nominee Marco Rubio, now confirmed Secretary of State, we'll get into him in just a little bit, have been locked into conversation with Trump's youngest. Look at him. He's already holding court. They want to know what Barron has to say. They value his insight. He's proven his worth. He's a serious operator. And so they're sitting there and they're listening to the young prince explain. Look at their body language. Like they're actually really genuinely like intent on him. Who knows what he's talking about? He might be talking about, like, you know, how he got Trump connected to Theo Vaughn or something. But they're like genuinely leaned in, focused on him, listening. There's something to this Barron guy, man. All right, let's get a couple of little scattered points. This one, a banger from friend of the show, Harry Bergeron, at Tysonberg on Twitter. He's responding to this tweet. So this is from Christopher Webb. I love this so much. At the inauguration, Justice Jumanji wore a distinctive collar adorned with cowrie shells, which are believed to offer protection from evil in African traditions. This choice mirrors the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg's practice of using collars to convey a message. Our girl boss judge is conveying a message. Look at that. She's got her little magic shells. Harry Bergeron says, imagine a 1950s debate where the wise lib says a black woman could even be on the Supreme Court one day. And the Southern racist says, is she going to wear her magic anti-voodoo talismans under or over the robe, and slaps his knee ignorantly as the lib scowls at his backwardness? And this is a banger. It took off. He said, watching Hateful Eight yesterday, so it was in this guy's voice. This is, she's going to have to go. She's going to, she's got to get out of there. I mean, she's basically just kind of a token. That's all she is. She's just a token. She's not going to be influential. Her opinions are all going to be written for her. She's just like the vessel that's contained by the, I don't know, the Marxist zeitgeist. But she's got to go. You can't be a serious country and have someone like this sitting on the highest court. We need more Clarence Thomases and fewer Jumanjis. Nick Land is extremely heartened at the events of late. He was signal boosting this from Chris Rufo. Zoomers are the most optimistic generation, based and panda-pilled. Now, I think Rufo's older than I am. I don't have the faintest idea what the hell panda-pilled means. Do we have any Zoomers in the audience that could clarify what in the hell is panda-pilled? This is a CBS News poll, optimistic about next 4 years with Trump as president by age. And it literally is just straight up by age. The youngest people are 2 out of 3, 18 to 29-year-olds, are optimistic about the next 4 years. And it goes on down from there to the boomers, only half of the boomers. Nick Land says, the Zoomers are boomers. The Doomers are boomers, not Zoomers. And so, I have to let you guys know that it is now officially the law of the land. Let it be known henceforth, doom-fapping is spiritual boomerism. I give this to you guys, I bequeath it unto you. Take it out into the internet streets and bludgeon all of the doomers. Tell them they are being spiritual boomers. Because there's a significant amount of overlap between the boomer haters and the doomers. The last thing that the doomers, the doomers want to hear is that they are boomers. Just rub it in their faces. Quite literally, it is the Zoomers who are most optimistic about the next 4 years, which also ought to tell you, if you are a Zoomer and you're not optimistic, why not? You may need to get that checked. Make sure I've got this saved for later on. More about that particular point. I'll mention it when I come back to it later on, after we get through some of these major stories. Here is another little white pill. Former Navy SEAL Cameron Hamilton has been officially named FEMA Interim Director. Cameron has been an extremely vocal critic of FEMA's horrific response to Western North Carolina. Could today get any better? This is from Cameron Hamilton. He says, I'm honored to serve. And look at that physiognomy. Navy SEAL with would die in a foxhole with him physiognomy, which, as we know, is the most important, the one hard science remaining. Here's an example. When FEMA was kicking hurricane survivors out of temporary housing, here's Cameron Hamilton. What the hell is going on with FEMA? FEMA kicks hurricane survivors out of temporary housing into snowstorm and freezing temperatures. So, my Western North Carolina brethren, help may be on the way. That's right, he is a handsome man. Kind of looks like you a little bit, Wyman. If I squint, kind of, I could see it. Philo's Miscellany confirms no AI used in EO summary. Man, this dude is an animal. Just wait till you see. We'll get to that here in a little bit, but just wait till you see what he broke down. with no AI. What a master. All right, so a lot of rumors last night about the January 6th protesters who have been pardoned, who are not being they're being basically roughed up by the prison guards, and they're not letting them out. So there was lawyers, there was the suit brigade went marching in there late last night because there's families standing out there in super cold weather, standing there waiting for them. It's been declared by the president they need to be released immediately. And the mayor of D.C., Muriel Bowser, who is herself very heavily implicated in the events of January 6th, reportedly has been stonewalling, has been dragging her feet on releasing them. Some speculation that I've seen about why that's happening is because they weren't expecting a complete. This is like educated speculation from the sources I've heard it from, is that they weren't expecting a full pardon for 1,500 plus. They were expecting maybe some of them, and then they would kind of drag it out, and they're in rough shape. There's been lots of stories that have come out over the years of the just straight up naked torture that's been happening to them. Now there's reports, family members are saying that they're being told by the imprisoned people that they are, that guards are like telling them, we'll find you on the outside. They're roughing them up. It's like, if this is true, I know this is all, I don't have any substantiation or proof that this is actually true, but I do trust all the sources I'm hearing it from. If this is true, every single one of those guards and any of their superiors need to be given the death penalty and executed swiftly. Of course, legally, but this is 100% a place for capital punishment, which, as you'll see when we go through the executive orders in a little bit, capital punishment is going to be making a comeback. So I saw one video yesterday of a stretcher being wheeled out toward an ambulance. Who knows? Don't know if it was actually one of the January 6 people, but they've been making their way out slowly, and they're. I suspect that there's going to be some fallout from the people who are blockading this, because there's some very angry lawyers who are chasing it down right now. But one man who I saw some complaining about, Andrew says it may not be factual, but it's true regardless. Like the cats and dogs, we should meme it regardless. Yes, exactly. I saw some people who are complaining they haven't heard anything from Douglas Mackey, who you might know as the I just forgot his name, but he's the one who was posting memes that were misleading people about when to vote back in 2016, and they just threw the book at him, just absolutely egregious. So he tweeted this. He said, since so many are asking, my team and I have not asked President Trump for a pardon at this time, as we are hoping for a favorable precedent-setting ruling in the Second Circuit that would prevent the DOJ from politically weaponizing the law. Thank you, everybody, for your support. You can donate to the effort here. This is an absolute heroic move, because he could ask for a pardon and probably get it, but he's choosing to go the long, hard route, because it would mean getting a favorable precedent-setting ruling. This is taking one for the team. This is what having a stomach for war looks like. Those of you who have been on Twitter today might be aware, I'm not going to call anybody out by name, but there are some retards who are suggesting that it was a bad move to pardon all of these J6ers because having political prisoners radicalizes people. Now, I might respect that position if the person offering it, I wouldn't agree with it, but I might respect it if the person offering it was offering themselves to replace them. They were recruiting people to go offer themselves to replace all 1,500 of them. Yeah, Ricky Vaughn, that was his name. Ricky Vaughn. Thank you, Whit. If you're going to say these 1,500 people who have been railroaded by the DOJ, who are in solitary confinement, who are being tortured, being abused, who are legitimate political prisoners, If you're saying they should stay in there, because we need political prisoners, then why don't you volunteer to be one of those political prisoners? If that's the answer, if the answer is get all of our guys arrested and put in prison to radicalize everyone, because pretty soon the normies are going to come around when they realize there's political prisoners. If you like, this is like the sort of thing that makes me wonder if somebody spends their free time microwaving their own head. How do you possibly conclude that it's better that Trump, when he has the opportunity to pardon these people, just leave them there because, it'll like radicalize people or something? And you appeal to frickin' Nelson Mandela and Hitler, who are demonstrable proof of the exact opposite. This is a career discrediting sort of thing to say. You cannot be taken seriously as a person whose thoughts are worth hearing if you manage to fart out some dumb shit like this. This is the exact opposite. Douglas Mackey taken one for the team in order to set favorable precedent, not asking for a pardon, but putting yourself at risk going through this whole process. This is a hero, man. Go support him. The link will be in the description if you're listening to the podcast, or it'll be on the King Pilled Substack if you want to donate to his fund. Okay. Got another Nick Land thought here. First of all, Cremu says, this is insanely broad, and I have no idea how it'll be enforced. This is from one of the executive orders. I'm not sure exactly which one, but it says it's the policy of the United States to A, secure the right of the American people to engage in constitutionally protected speech, B, ensure that no federal government officer, employee, or agent engages in or facilitates any conduct that would unconstitutionally abridge the free speech of any American citizen, C, ensure that no taxpayer resources are used to engage in or facilitate any conduct that would unconstitutionally abridge the free speech of any American citizen, and D, identify and take appropriate action to correct past misconduct by the federal government related to censorship of protected speech. This one right here. Ensure that no taxpayer resources are used to engage in or facilitate any conduct that would unconstitutionally abridge the free speech of any American citizen. How do you enforce this? There's no clear line that enforces it, which means it can be enforced arbitrarily. It can be enforced at will. It's an expression of political power. And Nick Land gets it. He says, feature, not a bug. Legal creep finally heading in the right direction. He adds, anything that isn't maximum momentum revolutionary rightism will soon be implicitly illegal. Amazing things are happening. The world's greatest dad says, this is a massive broadside at higher ed, all of which gets funding from the feds. You could just say things. Now that they've got it in writing, they need to mandate establishment of bureaucracies, especially DOJ, to enforce it. I have been just in awe at how rigorous and thorough and comprehensive this blitzkrieg of the institutions has been thus far. They are covering, they are dotting their I's and crossing their T's. This team of people knows what they're doing. You know what this is? You know what all these executive orders are? It's Project 2025. Everyone was crying. Oh, Trump distanced himself from Project 2025. See? Chris LaCivita and Susie Wiles, they're watering him down. He's not going to do all the good base stuff. If you're listening to the ASTROLABE, if you were tuning into the King Pilled channel, you would have heard and would have known months ago that Project 2025 has been a go all along. We went through a lot of the people who were involved in the creation of Project 2025, their mandate for leadership, their academy training federal workforce people on how the federal government actually works, teaching them how to interface with the media, how to get legislation through. And then the Mandate for Leadership, the 900-page tome, and all the different people who contributed to it. And it turns out that all the people who contributed to this Mandate for Leadership were all close members of Trump's inner circle, including Russ Vought, who is the director of the Office of Management and Budget, one of the most influential roles in the White House. It wasn't that hard to see. See, I'm not like patting myself on the back here. It wasn't that difficult to just kind of connect a couple of dots. You just had to look past the talking head doomfappers who want to convince you we're losing because they are losers. And they need us to lose so that they can maintain their identity, because their identity is more important to them than us winning. I'm not going to dignify them by naming names, but you know who I'm talking about. All right. Strap in. You ready? Here is a full breakdown of the Trump executive actions and policy analysis from the excellent, the remarkable Philo's Miscellany. This is as of June 20th, so this is all the executive orders he got through yesterday. Summary. General trends indicate an expedited push from the Trump administration to advance policy goals at the executive level pursuant to an Article 2 lead from the front approach. This diverges significantly from previous Day 1 executive action pushes, which usually apply to cabinet-level officials as directives. It is highly likely that Democratic lawmakers will seek to undermine these orders under a checks and balances prerogative with congressional bills introduced in the House and Senate. Due to the minority Democratic position in Congress, it is unlikely these challenges will succeed. Trump additionally has presidential veto power, necessitating a dual-step process where Congress must secure a two-thirds majority to overturn a presidential veto, which are inevitable for challenges to executive actions. Now, there are rumors going around that a prominent Democratic senator is going to be switching to the Republican Party next week. And John Fetterman has been asked if it's him, and he has explicitly denied that it's him. That was the first person I thought. I mentioned this, I think it was on yesterday's show, that my guess would be if somebody's going to do that right now to make a move like that, they're not going to do it to immediately like piss off the MAGA base by being like adding to the Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski's of the world. So my guess is that if somebody is going to make that move, they're going to be all in on the MAGA agenda. And my guess, speculating a little bit further, is if you're trying to figure out who this is going to be, I don't know yet. I'm saying this is how I'm going to go about trying to figure it out, and what I would expect is that it's going to be someone who's known. They've got a known name. People recognize their name, but they're not within the leadership. They're not super prominent because this is their angle for advancing their career. Yet another indicator that it's completely clear now, if you want to be successful in America, you need to be pro-MAGA. So I don't know who it is. It'll be very interesting to find out. But the wins just keep piling up, which is going to make it even more difficult to secure any sort of two-thirds majority for the Democrats. Most executive actions consider policy issues of energy, immigration, defense, bureaucratic restructuring, IGO status, and criminal justice. Energy, immigration, defense, bureaucratic restructuring, IGO status, criminal justice. It's like MAGA distilled down. Most EAs are generalized with specific or irregular mechanisms noted in each comment section. Cabinet members are granted broad reform powers in pursuit of their mission. Note that each executive action is currently unnumbered on the White House website, making precise ordering difficult. All Trump EAs are listed in chronological order from oldest to newest. A brief section on revoking Biden's executive orders appears, followed by a return to listing of EAs. So you've got the appointees. There's an announcement of cabinet and cabinet level appointments, sub-cabinet appointments, acting cabinet and cabinet level positions, and designated chairman and acting chairman. The president's first four executive actions are routine for an incoming administration, listing positions as determined by this code and various modern iterations upon the original Pendleton Service Act of 1883. Curiously, the name of these policies have changed from executive order to executive action, likely indicating the dynamic change of, I don't know if that was supposed to be actually a full. If Philo's in here, I don't know if that was a lost sentence or if this is supposed to lead into this. Flying the flag of the United States at full staff on Inauguration Day proclamation. So this is not a big one. I mean, it's big, but you know what I mean. Internal rescissions of harmful executive orders and actions. This EA lists revocations of 78 Biden executive orders and subsequent, quote, deeply unpopular, inflationary, illegal, and radical practices within every agency and office of the federal government. This appears to be a blank slate and blanket approach to overturn Biden's executive level policies. Critical policy areas include nearly every facet of executive authority. Notably, the National Security Advisor shall review all national security memoranda in Biden's term for, quote, harm to national security, domestic resilience, and American values within 45 days. So I would expect that we're going to get even more after this review is done. And most likely, I'm gonna guess that it's going to be in the revocation and then legal challenge of these executive orders that the question of Joe Biden's sentience is going to become a legal matter of consequence. I don't know if you're going to get the whole like post hoc invocation of the 25th Amendment. I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if there's legal legs there. It seems like there maybe could be, but I think it'll be in the legal challenges to the revocation of some of these executive orders. If we studied them for a while, we could probably pick out which ones are going to be most likely focused on. And the ones that they do focus on will tell you something about what they're trying to hide, what they're trying to cover up. But my speculation is that it's going to come out of this. So here's a summary of the things that they revoked. One that established a whole-of-government approach to advancing racial equity and supporting underserved communities. Now, as I read through all of this, if you guys stick with me, sorry, I cannot stand having socks on while I'm doing this. I don't know why. I don't know why I leave them on. If you guys just stick with me through this whole list and you compare just the overall tenor and vibe of all the Biden executive orders with the overall tenor and vibe of all the Trump executive orders, you're not going to get a clear delineation of the difference between these two administrations. The next one, prohibited discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. The next one specifically addressed equity and justice for Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. The next one focused on DEI and accessibility within the federal workforce. Addressed various aspects of the COVID-19 pandemic, including response, recovery, public health measures, and worker safety. Reiterated the commitment to addressing climate change through various measures, including scientific guidance, environmental protection, and clean energy initiatives. Focused on reforming immigration policies, prioritizing family reunification, and addressing the root causes of migration. Aimed at strengthening the Affordable Care Act and improving access to affordable health care. Restricted the use of privately operated criminal detention facilities. Emphasized effective and accountable policing practices. Focused on the implementation of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, established initiatives to advance educational equity and opportunity for Hispanic, Native American, and Black Americans, addressed voting rights and fair elections, guaranteed an education environment free from sex discrimination, advanced equality for LGBTQ plus individuals. Now back to the Trump orders. Restoring freedom of speech and ending federal censorship. Under authority of Section 301 of Title III U.S. Code, the policy of the United States to secure the right of the American people to engage in constitutionally protected speech and ensure no federal restriction of that right. These powers are vested in the Attorney General's office to investigate the previous actions during the Biden administration to assess compliance. So, the Attorneys General are being instructed to investigate previous actions during the Biden administration. Ending the weaponization of the federal government. Under authority Section 301 of Title III, this EA is a general statement decrying prior Biden administration targeted action against American citizens perceived as political opponents. The EA mentions the DOJ prosecuting over 1,500 individuals associated with January 6th and dropping nearly all cases against BLM rioters, which is something that Trump mentioned in his press conference. He did yet another freaking press conference today, just answering questions. And when they asked him about this, he immediately flipped it on him and said, what about all these murderers and rioters and people who were just destroying shit and running around like chimping out? Nobody prosecuted them. He immediately flipped it back around on them. So it's interesting that they're actually taking this as a like a legitimate legal defense, I think. This EA directs the Director of National Intelligence to review the Biden administration political targeting efforts. So Tulsi Gabbard is going to be reviewing the Biden administration political targeting efforts. Return to in-person work. This is a popular one. A popular among non-federal employees, not popular among federal employees. All executive level departments and agencies are directed to terminate remote work and require employees to return to work in person on a full-time, 40-hour, 9-to-5 custom basis with appropriate exemptions. This mirrors private sector changes following COVID and will likely cause the voluntary quitting of inconvenienced federal staff. This eases the Trump administration efforts to reduce civil service bureaucracy and Biden-era holdovers, placing lifestyle pressure on underperforming staff. So they're coming at it from every angle to get a bunch of these useless people who are just running out the clock, not doing any work, or even worse, they're spending their work hours at home actively engaged in activism against the president. Just running out the clock and cashing out their relatively speaking, massive pensions. So just by forcing these people to quit, and based on stuff that Vivek has said, a lot of this stuff is Vivek's brainchild. So I know everyone wants to hate him right now and they think his career is over, but the vast majority of the actual nuts and bolts of how the Doge effort is going to be undertaken, and we're going to break that down in more detail here when we get to that executive order, because it looks like Yarvin's winning again. But a lot of that came from Vivek. And he's delineated that part of the point here is we're going to take every angle that we possibly can. One of them is just simply order them all back to work, and a lot of them aren't going to want to come back, and we're going to force them to quit because of that. And then the ones who do come back, then they're just going to offer them like a 2-year like fully funded pension, or they're going to give them 2 years of compensation, paying them very well for 2 years, give them a massive golden parachute to just quit, get paid for 2 years, and then re-enter the private sector. And a lot of these people, honestly, they make a lot of money, but they're probably terrible at saving it. And so that's going to be very compelling to them. And I know that there's a lot of people who really like remote work and want to retain remote work. And I think that's great. I think I also understand the perspective of the companies that are like, if you're remote, I don't know what you're doing. So for large companies, like if you're going to work for a large corporation, then I would just expect like you're not going to get remote work privileges unless you are an exceptional performer. If you want that remote work stuff, then you need to get yourself into a smaller team. And absolutely, I have no sympathy whatsoever for federal employees. Sorry, guys. If you're going to be a federal employee and you're going to get all the benefits that come with that, then you're going to have to go work at the office. Regulatory freeze pending review. All executive departments and agencies must not propose, or issue any rule in any manner until the president or appointed head reviews and approves the rule. The OMB director, Russ Vought, is authorized and directed to publish this information in the Federal Register, which is the official journal of USG and serves to check any managerial changes in the civil service bureaucracy. So, no new regulations. And it's going to be reviewed and published. Hiring freeze. This is a full federal civilian employee hiring freeze applied throughout the executive branch. No federal civilian position vacant on January 20th, 2025 may be filled, and no new position may be created. Not affected by this EA are the military, immigration enforcement, national security, or public safety. Within 90 days of 20 January, the United States DOGE Service, or the USDS, which is a little clue about where we're going with that, the USDS shall submit a plan to address efficiency improvements and attrition. Interestingly, this EA also applies to using contracting by those trying to circumvent it. So, like, this is not the GOP of old, folks. See, the GOP of old would have probably done something like this, but wouldn't have closed this loophole about contractors. But they're covering everything. This is what I'm talking about. These are intelligent operators who are covering every possible contingency. delivering emergency price relief for American families and defeating the cost of living crisis. A generalized EA remarking on significantly increased regulatory costs under the Biden administration and downstream effects of cost of living. The assistant to the president for economic policy will report to the president every 30 days to update him on the status of improving cost of living for citizens. And so I suppose this here is some of these, like some executive orders are just, they're not that big of a deal. They're just kind of like getting something on the record or just delivering a point of emphasis. For this one, at least, the assistant to the president for economic policy, if he's not reporting to the president every 30 days, then he's going to get in trouble. Putting America first in international environmental agreements. The United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Change Agreement. Indeed, it appears that all U.S. involvement with the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change will cease immediately. The U.S. International Climate Finance Plan is revoked and rescinded immediately. This is similar to Trump's first-term withdrawal from the same agreement. So they were in it, and then they were out, and then they were back in it, now they're back out again. This is just the first of a number of different major withdrawals from European multinational agreements that I think is going to happen in this in Trump's first term. Granting pardons and commutation of sentences for certain offenses related to the events at or near the United States Capitol on January 6. 14 people, colloquially known as Jan 6ers, have their sentences commuted with a full, complete, and unconditional pardon to all other individuals convicted. This represents a parallel effort to Biden's pardoning of many individuals, far in excess of traditional executive pardons at end of term. Application of Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary-Controlled Applications Act to TikTok. Effectively a stay in the ongoing judicial action against TikTok, stating concerns about foreign adversary-controlled applications. This issue is too complicated to detail here. What's really funny is that Trump is going to save TikTok. He's going to ensure that TikTok is bought out by an American company, and all the Zoomers are just going to love him even more for it. This is what was great about TikTok. Posted their little banner when it was closed off for Americans starting on the evening of January 19th, and said basically like, we're working with President Trump to save your TikTok. All the TikTok people are real upset, and then Trump is going to save TikTok for them, and they're going to love him for it. Withdrawing the United States from the World Health Organization. They're citing mishandling of COVID-19 and excessive payments required from the U.S. This is an interesting one, mishandling of COVID-19, because I suspect we may come back around to that later on. Restoring accountability to policy influencing positions within the federal workforce. Reinstates his first-term executive order. This provides easier mechanisms to terminate federal employees and additionally revokes the Biden administration's executive order from January 22nd of 2021. Biden's executive order functioned in the opposite manner, making it more difficult to terminate federal employees, as well as establishing a $15 an hour minimum wage. This may alter the wage floor for federal employees, but the full policy impact is not assessed here. Holding former government officials accountable for election interference and improper disclosure of sensitive governmental information. This EA revokes the security clearances, usually a TSSCI or department dependent, for the 50 individuals, including high-ranking officials such as James Clapper, Leon Panetta, John Brennan, and John Bolton. DNI is further tasked with follow-up on any inappropriate intelligence community activity. This is a big one. This is lopping off at least one major head of the Hydra, because this is how a lot of the entire Russiagate scandal, all of these big psyops that they've pulled off, the Hunter Biden laptop story, all of these things have been a product of these guys retaining their security clearances. There's no reason whatsoever. They're traitors. Every single one of these people is a traitor. So not only should they not have security clearances, they shouldn't be free. They should be in prison. And I also saw that Trump revoked the Secret Service protection that John Bolton had. Why the hell did John Bolton have Secret Service protection? And RFK couldn't get Secret Service protection, but John Bolton is going to have it? I mean, I'm sure there's probably a lot of people who want to kill John Bolton, but that's what happens when you live a life like John Bolton did. And it should not be on the taxpayers to defend you from the stupid shit that you've said and done. Declaring a national emergency at the southern border of the United States. SecDef and DHS Secretary will partner together in securing the southern border of the United States with Mexico. The IRR and National Guard are included, and SecDef/DHS Secretary, so it would be Hegseth and Kristi Noem, are granted powers of provisioning detention space, transit, and logistics to support civilian-controlled law enforcement operations. We're getting the military deployed to protect the border. They will further partner with any governor who wishes to improve physical security along their southern border. Physical countermeasures, including unmanned aerial systems, will be included, and appropriate FAA and FCC restrictions on their usage of the border will be rescinded. Within 90 days, the SecDef and DHS Secretary will report to the President about whether to invoke the Insurrection Act of 1807, which things could get even more interesting. Memorandum to resolve the backlog of security clearances for Executive Office of the President personnel. The President's key staff, approved by White House counsel, are to be immediately granted TSSCI security clearances for a period not to exceed 6 months. This is likely to expedite other policy efforts which require knowledge of sensitive information to make rapid and dynamic decisions. America First Trade Policy merits its own briefing, systematic review of USMCA and many other trade arrangements at the IGO level. Emphasis is placed on enacting tariffs, assessing damage of illegal fentanyl imports, and changing supply chain policy to improve economic advantage against China. Most reviews and changes are required to be submitted by Secretaries of State, Treasury, Defense, Commerce, Homeland Security, and other advisors by April 1st. April Fools. Clarifying the military's role in protecting the territorial integrity of the United States. By January 30th, 2025, SecDef shall assign U.S. Northcom the mission to seal the borders and maintain the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and security of the United States by repelling forms of invasion, including unlawful mass migration, narcotics trafficking, human smuggling and trafficking, and other criminal activities. Now, interestingly, January 30th is now basically 8 days away. And last I saw, I don't think that Pete Hegseth has been confirmed for SecDef. So I'd be interested to know, I'm not going to go look at the exact text in it right now, but I'd be interested to know if this responsibility would fall to like an undersecretary that maybe has been confirmed already, or what, or whether this just means like they know that Hegseth is going to be confirmed by January 30th. Unleashing American Energy merits its own briefing. The first energy policy executive action and generalized. Notable eliminations include the electrical vehicle mandate, as well as the immediate review of all agency actions that burden development of domestic energy resources. In his inaugural speech, Trump mentioned energy exports as a key element of policy going forward. We are going to paywall our market, and we are going to sell our energy to other countries, which is one of the ways you support the dollar. The Attorney General was also instructed to review pending litigation against current policies. Many Biden administration EOs relating to energy policy are abolished in this executive action. The American Climate Corps is also abolished. All carbon taxes or similar mechanisms are abolished. SecDef will ensure that the National Defense Stockpile will provide a robust supply of critical minerals in event of future shortfall. Just wiping shit out. No more climate bullshit. Just getting rid of it all. Realigning the United States Refugee Admissions Program. Record levels of immigration to the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program, especially in major metropolitan areas, is highlighted with the suspension of the U.S. RAP indefinitely. Secretary of Homeland Security shall suspend decisions on applications for refugee status. Protecting the meaning and value of American citizenship states a legal distinction between traditional and modern interpretations of the 14th Amendment's birth citizenship. This amendment has been a cornerstone of most progressive Supreme Court decisions in the 20th and 21st centuries, and strays greatly from its original interpretation after the Civil War. This EA clarifies U.S. policy on citizenship by ordering review of parental citizenship status, with carryover status to the child. This allows for the U.S. to determine citizenship at time of birth, allowing for additional possible revocations of U.S. citizenship. So this is the one that they're really going at now. This is the one that they want to block, because of how significant of a change this would be to return to the traditional interpretation of the 14th Amendment. They've already got their court cases lined up. There's some pregnant alien. We call them aliens now. Some pregnant alien who who, if she's an alien, she doesn't have standing. How does she even have standing to bring this case in the first place? She's an illegal alien. She has no standing in an American court. But this is the one that they're trying to bring And they're bringing it in Jumanji's district, of course. I feel pretty strongly that this Supreme Court is going to side with the administration on this definition. I bet you it's going to be a 5-4. I'll bet you Amy Coney Barrett, who's really just kind of terrible. I'll bet you Amy Coney Barrett sides with the libs on this one. But as someone said in the chat here just a little bit ago, Sotomayor is sick. She may not be around a whole lot longer. So we may get another one. Securing our borders merits its own brief. This is the mass deportation executive action detailing appropriate actions by ICE, AG, and DHS to alter executive department or agency protocol to restrict illegal immigration into the United States. This is my favorite one. Putting people over fish, stopping radical environmentalism to provide water to Southern California. This EA refers to California's inadequate response to ongoing wildfires, changing policy on how snowmelt and rainwater is directed. Currently, Trump alleges that the water supply is diverted into the Pacific Ocean and that the Secretary of Commerce and Secretary of Interior, that would be Lutnick and Burgum, need to alter this policy at the federal level. This primarily affects the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. It's called rain. It comes down from heaven. Restoring the death penalty and protecting public safety. The Attorney General shall pursue the death penalty for all crimes of a severity demanding its use. This includes murder of a law enforcement officer, capital crime committed by an illegal alien, and the encouragement of this policy adoption for the state AGs. The AG shall evaluate the 37 murderers whose federal death sentences were commuted by President Biden and advise on further imprisonment. So, 37 murderers, their death sentences were commuted, and the AG is going to evaluate them and advise on further imprisonment. Like, they're going hard with this stuff, man. Obviously, the follow-through matters, the extent to which it happens, but they're setting the bar real high. I'm seeing in the chat here that Hegseth has been confirmed. If Josh Ham says Hegseth was confirmed, I'll take his word for it. I just missed it. Restoring promoting, this is a big one, promoting beautiful federal civic architecture, largely self-evident. These are broad plans to reinstate regional, traditional, and classical architecture for federal building, as well as guiding principles for such construction. And I think it needs to be, this needs to be extended to renovating. Not just new buildings, but past buildings need to be renovated as well. Restoring accountability for career senior executives. Under Article 2, the president has the power to remove subordinates, and this EA deals specifically with, quote, career senior executive service officials that are considered difficult to fire. The restructuring of each agency involves terminating the Executive Resources Board and having a new ERB and board. This is more aligned with the C-suite system in place in private sector corporations. Declaring a national energy emergency. Follows other EAs utilizing the National Emergencies Act and Section 301 of Title III. This is a consolidation of Secretaries of Interior, Energy, and Defense to assess ability to acquire energy and electricity and fuels needed to conduct domestic and foreign operations. There's a thing that was dropped just before I went live here. I haven't had time to really look at the details on it, but they announced a $500 billion infrastructure project for AI, building up AI infrastructure. They're calling it Stargate because, of course, they are. So a $500 billion, and it's going to be a privately funded project as well. This is not a publicly funded program. It's a privately funded project. $500 billion for building AI infrastructure. And do you know what building AI infrastructure is? To a very large degree, it's energy. Massive, massive, massive amounts of energy. This is going to be a huge focus. Now, some of the names that are involved in this project, Sam Altman, Larry Ellison, are very eyebrow-raising. And it's interesting, I waited to see if I wanted to see Elon's tweet. Because Elon and Sam Altman are famously not friends. Obviously, Elon would be well aware of what's coming. So I'll be interested to see how that plays out. I want to see what he has to say. And he may just not weigh in on it at all. But I'll have more on that once I have time to dig into it a little bit more. But that's related here, the national energy emergency. It federalizes many resources in an effort to reduce overall energy prices passed on to the American consumer. And energy prices are the biggest driver of inflation. Because if you raise, say, oil, if you raise oil, the price of oil, it affects like every single step along the supply chain. So rapidly reducing energy costs, increasing the expansiveness of it, the available energy, is going to be a very good way of combating inflation. Andrew says, Matt, energy infrastructure was exactly what I said to Mike when I saw the $500 billion headline. Yes. Yeah, Sam Altman murdered Ajit, which makes that whole story all the more interesting. I haven't followed it super closely. I haven't talked about it on the show because I don't really have a lot to add, apart from Sam Altman seems like a scumbag, and this looks really, 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 really bad. But knowing that this was coming, the significance of this makes that story all the more interesting. Let's see here. Josh says, apologies. Hegseth got voted through the Senate Armed Forces Committee, now moving on to the full Senate. Okay, so he hasn't been fully confirmed, but he's going to be. Continuing on here, we're on page 7 of 9. Temporary withdrawal of all areas on the outer continental shelf from offshore wind leasing and review of the federal government's leasing and permitting practices for wind projects. Restricts any offshore wind turbine leasing and review of existing leases in the above geographic areas. Criticizes Biden administration efforts and environment damage sustained from wind turbines. The whales. Note that this has been a key focus from Trump, especially on podcast appearances prior to the election. Here is a massive one. Reevaluating and realigning United States foreign aid. A general review of all United States foreign assistance programs. All United States foreign assistance programs conducted under the guidelines provided by the Secretary of State, as well as the Director of Office of Management and Budget. Again, Russ Vought. An interesting call out in Section 1 criticizes old foreign aid mechanisms as, quote, promoting ideas in foreign countries that are directly inverse to harmonious and stable relations internal to and among countries. We'll come back to this here in just a little bit when we talk about Marco Grande. Organization of the National Security Council and subcommittees lays out the structure of the National Security Council and staff. Most members are cabinet-level officials or specific advisors in keeping with previous iterations of executive NSCs. The function is laid out in a charter form with rules of order outlined in minute detail. This document supersedes all other NSC structure directives previously laid out. Recall the thread that I read on here, from Twitter, tweeted by Josh Steinman, talking about how he heard that there were holdovers. There were going to be holdovers kept on the National Security Council from the Biden administration. And he's like, this is a major problem. This is an extremely important council. And having backstabbers in there would be a critical error. And what do you know? Within a week, they were going through and loyalty testing everyone and booting all of those who failed the loyalty tests. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD, Global Tax Deal. The OECD Global Tax Deal, under direction of the Treasury Secretary, no longer has any force or effect in the United States. You think the tariffs aren't coming? The tariffs are coming, man. The Treasury Secretary, working with the U.S. Trade Representative, think tariffs, will investigate tax rules of other countries to see which are no longer worth complying with. Protecting the American people against invasion. Another immigration-related executive action, too many details to list, creates federal Homeland Security task forces and establishes Homeland Security task forces in all states nationwide. Their objective is to end the presence of criminal cartels, foreign gangs, and transnational criminal organizations throughout the United States. Additionally, directs DHS to efficiently remove recent entrants and other aliens. Basically declaring war on cartels and human trafficking, aka the City of London. Unleashing Alaska's extraordinary resource potential. opens up Alaska for liquefied natural gas potential, including sale and transportation internally, as well as export to other allied nations within the Pacific region. This overturns the multiple long-standing ANWR drilling restrictions under both Biden and Obama administrations. Additionally, rescinds multiple public land orders from Biden's Secretary of Interior. Drill, baby, drill. We're going to have the best oil and natural gas. Protecting the United States from foreign terrorists and other national security and public safety threats. Macro policy about national security combining Secretary of State, AG, DHS, and DNI efforts to identify countries in the world which warrant partial or full suspension of admission of nationals. This is likely similar to the colloquial Muslim ban during Trump's first term. Further evaluation of visa programs used by hostile or non-state actors reference previous Trump administration policy on transnational criminal organizations. America First policy directive to the Secretary of State. Again, we're going to talk about Marco Grande here in just a little bit. Blanket statement directing the Secretary of State to place the interests of United States and American citizens first. Simple and short EA. Now, I saw people saying, oh man, Trump had to issue this executive order just to keep Rubio in line. And I don't think that's what this is. We're going to go into Rubio here in a little bit. I'm getting very bullish on Marco Grande. This here is giving Rubio the full cover to do everything that he needs to do. I literally have to do this. The president gave me an explicit direct order in public view, and it's established permanently in the Federal Register. I have to do this. And here you go. The establishment of the Doge. And we're going to go into that in just a bit. As soon as we finish this, we'll circle back to it because I've got some very interesting things on that. But I'll read it for you right now. Establishing and implementing the President's Department of Government Efficiency. This is the establishment of the Doge. More formally, it is the renaming of the United States Digital Service. So there's an existing organization called the United States Digital Service. More on that in a little bit. And its placement in the executive office of the president. The administrator is accountable to the president, Elon Musk, and the Doge shall terminate on July 4th, 2026. Primary directives include modernizing federal technology and software and maximizing efficiency and productivity. This may open up federal operations to private sector corporations and their incorporation. Modernizing federal technology and software. Very interesting. This is a very interesting angle. Continuing with the executive actions, defending women from gender ideology extremism and restoring biological truth to the federal government. Simply put, men are men and women are women in the purview of USG. A legalistic refutation of Federation regulations stating the contrary. All identification documents, passports, visas, global entry cards, and others must accurately reflect binary gender categorization of male or female. Federal agencies are further advised to remove non-binary language. And, real quick, I just wanted to highlight this one section right here. Female means a person belonging at conception to the sex that produces the large reproductive cell. Male means a person belonging at conception to the sex that produces the small reproductive cell. They're being incredibly semantic about it. We're not going to get sucked into all this bullshit about intersex exceptions or whatever. This is the standard. On a biological level. Yeah, trans people no longer exist. Just like that. They're gone. Yeah, Bryce says Marco has an incentive to follow orders since he can just be sent to the pasture since he left his Senate seat. Ending radical and wasteful government DEI programs and preferencing. Formal abolition of DEI policies put in place by the Biden administration. This heavily legal EA backdates DEI efforts to January 20th, 2021, and will likely serve as the basis for restructuring or abolition of existing programs created under the previous administration. Operational impact and contracting status will also be considered. Reforming the federal hiring process and restoring merit to government service. A new federal hiring plan designed to prioritize merit and competency, contrasting with the previous DEI-related EA. Within 6 months, DOGE, alongside executive budgeting offices, will put forth a plan designed to improve recruitment. These measures should include decreasing government-wide time to hire to under 80 days, improving candidate communication, and usage of modern technology. This largely reflects the private sector hiring process. It's just like super common sense stuff. It's funny. It's pathetic that you actually have to have an executive action for this, but now we do. Slutty milk. Small reproductive cell. It's perfectly average size. Thank you very much. Duff, keep your small reproductive cell to yourself. 3 more. Designating cartels and other organizations as foreign terrorist organizations and specially designated global terrorists. Designates cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, which is actually reflective of the 2019 Trump effort to designate Hezbollah and proxies as TCOs, which I'm not sure exactly what TCOs are. The national security architecture here is not used, but its atypical domestic policy theater is a departure from GWAT norms. Mentioned groups include Tren de Aragua and MS-13. Interestingly, by designating them foreign terrorist organizations, there is now a pretext established for going after anybody who is seen it can be proven, say any NGO that can be proven to be cooperating or providing support or funding or infrastructure to their efforts as aiding and abetting terrorism, which changes those NGO conversations significantly. And also, someone asked him when he was signing the executive order on this, someone asked him if he would send special forces into Mexico to go after the cartels. And he said, maybe it might happen, and he goes, crazier things have happened. Special forces bros are going to have some fun. Restoring names that honor American greatness. This renames and undoes the Obama-Biden labeling of geographic features of Mount McKinley and the Gulf of America. The Gulf of America. It's official now. It is the Gulf of America. And right now, the Gulf of America is getting hammered with some snow. We actually got some snow last night. Woke up to a little dusting. And apparently down in I've seen pictures out of Florida. I saw pictures from Destin and southern Louisiana and Houston where they're getting like inches of snow. It looked like 6 or 8 inches. Crazy times. All of the Southerners, I was talking with Andrew, politically Catholic, about this earlier. Just wait till all the Southerners suddenly get adapted to cold weather. Then the Yankees are really going to have it coming. This EA may be a portent for reverting domestic military bases back to pre-Obama generals and heroes. See, these are the sorts of things that they don't have to do. They don't have to make these kinds of moves. But I think these sorts of moves are almost as important as the other ones that people take more seriously. You're like, oh, it's just kind of symbolic or whatever. You realize how important symbols are? Calling it the Gulf of America? Just reading that, Gulf of America. And celebrating our heroes. And I mean, I think Denali is a cool name, but celebrating American heroes is a good thing. And it was named after an American hero, so let's celebrate him. The very last one, guaranteeing the states protection against invasion. Legal justification for federal sovereignty with Immigration and Nationality Act and more immigration measures. This is the formal naming of the southern border crossing as an invasion. This legal status change may be challenged in the courts, but it is within the powers of the executive. And that is the end of the document. Once again, shout out to Philo's Miscellany for putting this together in very short order and pushing it out for our benefit. Now, all of you who've sat and listened to this whole thing are, you know more about this than just about anybody else. So here's, I think I forgot to open a tab. Yeah, okay, I did. So let me open a tab here very quickly and pull something up. USDS. So, the United States Digital Service, now known as the United States Doge Service. And, oh, come on. No, don't do this. The window's frozen up. All right, let's look at the comments here for a minute. Duffett says it's a blizzard on the beach in North Carolina. Good grief. Snow on the beach. That's weird. Yeah, Josh Ham says material aid and support to enemies of America equals the literal textbook definition of treason. Isn't it odd that treason is just kind of like not a thing? Like, how often are people actually prosecuted for treason? I mean, maybe it does happen and it just isn't talked about on the news or something. It just doesn't make it out into the public sphere. Let's ask, can I open this tab here? Okay, yeah, this tab's working. Let's ask Grok real quick. I'll just do Grok. When was the last time an American was convicted of treason? The browser's still stuck. The last American to be convicted of treason was Tomoya Kawakita in 1952. Kawakita, a Japanese American, was sentenced to death for his actions during World War II, where he worked as an interpreter at a Japanese POW camp and was accused of abusing American prisoners. His sentence was later commuted to life imprisonment by President Dwight Eisenhower, and he was eventually released and deported in 1963. So he was convicted of treason in 1952. Then his sentence was commuted to life imprisonment, and then he was released and deported 11 years later. So this is the last person convicted of treason. What about the last person charged with treason? The last person to be charged with treason in the United States was Adam Gadon. In 2006, an American-born convert to Islam was indicted for providing material support to al-Qaeda, including making propaganda videos for the terrorist organization. Although he was charged with treason, he was never convicted of this charge, as he was killed by a U.S. drone strike in Pakistan in 2015 before a trial could take place. Well, I guess you don't have to try the dude if you just drone strike him. How many people have been convicted of treason in American history? Approximately 13 convictions for treason. Very interesting. It's strange that it's just like, maybe this is just movie brain or something, but like reading and studying history, it seems like treason is a much bigger issue that's addressed a lot more. And yet suddenly, in American history, only 13 people have been convicted of treason. This seems very odd. And it's been now, what is that, 75 years almost? Very, very interesting. Okay, let's see if this is... there we go. Okay. So, the United States Doge Service. The United States Doge Service, formerly the United States Digital Service, is a technology unit housed within the Executive Office of the President of the United States. It provides consultation services to federal agencies on information technology. It seeks to improve and simplify digital service and to improve federal websites. It was launched on August 11, 2014. So the United States Digital Service was launched under Obama as like an IT consulting agency. It has created a digital services playbook for improving digital government. It's a draft web design standards, quote, to build accessible mobile-friendly government website, Tech FAR handbook on federal contracting and procurement, and a discovery sprint guide. The USDS sends a report to Congress each year detailing its projects and accomplishments. Its federal agency work spans across the Veterans Affairs, Department of Defense, Small Business Administration, General Services Administration, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Education, and Health and Human Services. What this means is that they have a footprint in all of these bureaucratic swamps. For years, people both inside and outside of government were working on ways to make government more effective using technology and design, most notably CFPB, Code for America, Government Digital Service in the UK, and countless U.S. government entities. The idea took more concrete shape when Jen Palka, having visited United Kingdom's government digital service, joined Team CTO, and her ideas converged with what was already underway in the USG. The HC.gov crisis accelerated the idea, proved out a valuable and viable operational model in theory of change, and in some ways served as USDS's first project. So this was the healthcare.gov launch, where they spent like some absurd billions of dollars or something on building a website that didn't work. The first head of the USDS was Mikey Dickerson, a former Google engineer who was involved in the 2013 and 14 rescue of the healthcare.gov website. He was succeeded by Matt Cutts, who maintained the position until April of 2021. The third administrator of the USDS was Meena Sang. During the Biden administration, Sang led the U.S. in deploying a new website about COVID-19 vaccines. So in April of 2021, the administrator of the IT, like the IT services for the government, is a China woman. How interesting. She worked on healthcare projects in rural Malawi for the Clinton Foundation. She's the first woman and first Asian American to be administrator of the USDS. I love how they have to put this. First woman and first Asian American. She was the third person. She received a waiver that allowed her to hold on to her stock portfolio while serving in her leadership role in government. She owned shares of Rebellion Defense, an AI defense company, which she disclosed to the federal government. She sold the shares 3 weeks after being appointed administrator, which was within the required deadline to do so. In 2022, the Project on Government Oversight raised questions about the propriety of her stock holdings. In 2022, the U.S. Department of Defense made 2 purchases from Rebellion Defense totaling $225,000. It was pennies. So, coming back to the USDS website, in 2021, the USDS employed 215 people and was looking to expand further. The Florida Digital Service created in 2020 was modeled after it. On January 2025, the United States Digital Service was renamed as the United States Doge Service in reference to the Department of Government Efficiency. In the executive order renaming USDS, President Donald Trump ordered every agency to create a Doge team of at least 4 employees in consultation with USDS to implement the president's Doge agenda. We're going to get into more detail on that here in just a minute. But this is, as I'm understanding this, the Doge is a separate, it's a temporary organization under the USDS. So the Doge has a sunset date. But the Doge is like a consultation group within the USDS, which is an existing agency, but it's been renamed the United States Doge Services. So are they going to name it back? Are they just going to keep the Doge name in there even after the Doge sunsets? This is very interesting to me. So, here's where things get fun. So from the executive order, it says Doge structure, reorganization, and renaming of the United States Digital Service. The United States Digital Service is hereby publicly renamed as the United States Doge Service and shall be established in the executive office of the President. Doge teams. In consultation with the USDS, each agency head shall establish within their respective agencies a Doge team of at least 4 employees. So every single federal agency is going to establish a team of 4 employees, of at least 4, which may include special government employees hired or assigned within 30 days of the date of this order. Agency heads shall select the Doge team members in consultation with the USDS administrator. Remember when they were talking about how Trump's transition team was privately funded and they were getting everything underway early rather than waiting, like most administrations have, from immediately after the election, they were plowing along. So the Doge has been hiring people for this effort, and they've been selecting all of the agency heads. So I can only assume that they've already been coordinating this and planning who the teams are going to be within each agency. And they'll select the Doge team members in consultation with the USDS administrator, who is Elon Musk. So Elon Musk is going to be consulting with the agency heads to pick who the Doge team members are going to be for each Doge team within each organization. Each Doge team will typically include one Doge team lead, one engineer, one human resources specialist, and one attorney. So you have the coordinator, the person who probably ostensibly has some experience within the federal government, knows how to speak the language, knows how to navigate it. An engineer, so you got your nerd, you got your autist, a human resources person who will specialize in how do we fire all the people from this organization, and how do we ensure that we hire new people without giving them incentive to be shitty. And lastly, an attorney to cover the ass of the HR specialists. Agency heads shall ensure that Doge team leads coordinate their work with USDS and advise their respective agency heads on implementing the president's Doge agenda. So they're basically creating like little four-man strike teams whose job is to work full-time for the next 18 months, gutting out all of the waste and fraud and abuse while coordinating with Elon, with the agency heads, with the director of OMB and OPM, who are both fully on board with maximal Doge agenda, and all of them reporting to the president. Doge chapters. Yes. That's great, Melon. The OGC guy gets it right away. Doge chapters. And for anybody out there who is like poo-pooing the Doge thing, they've been actively recruiting from Twitter. So you could have applied and you could have ensured that you would be one of the people on these teams if you were so qualified. So if you're someone who would have been qualified, who could have done this, and you weren't doing, and you didn't apply, then I don't want to hear it. Section 4, modernizing federal technology and software to maximize efficiency and productivity. Now, I said this in one of the group chats a couple days ago. I was very interested to see what this entails. What kind of software? Where is this software coming from? Who's providing it? What all does it do? The USDS administrator shall commence a software modernization initiative to improve the quality and efficiency of government-wide software, network infrastructure, and information technology systems. Among other things, the USDS administrator shall work with agency heads to promote interoperability between agency networks and systems, ensure data integrity, and facilitate responsible data collection and synchronization. What this will mean is that these Doge teams, yep, Bryce, you got it right there. These Doge teams are going to, I suspect, if part of their job, now my nerd boys out there, you help me out with this. I don't nerd as well as some of you guys. My guess is that they're going to have, or at least they're going to have a claim, it'll maybe be up to the agency head, to have like root level access to all of the data for every single one of these agencies. Now, maybe they may or may not get in. There's going to be, obviously issues with classification, and they're not going to necessarily have security clearances, or maybe some of them will. But to me, it looks like the software modernization aspect of this it's both significant and necessary, and it's also a fig leaf or a pretext for being able to dig as deep into this as they possibly can. Eric Winter says maybe network stuff in the DoD is a huge mess, which obviously is going to contribute to corruption and waste and fraud and abuse. These people have 18 months to do a hell of a lot of work, and more power to them. Absolutely. And then it also says, this one's cut off, but it says agency head shall take all necessary steps in coordination with the USDS administrator to the maximum extent consistent with law to ensure they have full and prompt access to all unclassified agency record software systems and IT systems. I should have just kept reading it. I would have seen the rest of my, I would have had an answer to a lot of my question. Obviously, unclassified is a big qualifier there. But then you've also got Kash Patel over at FBI, who has been ranting for a long time about how the classification system has been egregiously abused, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that's been classified that shouldn't be. So we might be getting a big declassification effort going along with all of this. Now here is what really got me interested. This CEBK. I don't know who this is. Hey, they follow me. I didn't even notice that. Federal Vacancies Reform Act, accelerationist, Americanism in one country, chronic illnesses aren't real. We're all extended genotypes of our ancestral prophets. My sort of guy. Says this is literally the main thing Yarvin said would signify real regime change. He repeatedly brought up that Doge wouldn't matter and would signify how much Trump doesn't matter unless it acted like FDR's Bureau of the Budget. Yarvin, you won. Own it, celebrate, smile, bow, and clap. And he says here, this is how FDR took over the first administrative state. He set up his Bureau of the Budget as loyal White House advisors who'd go into every agency with de facto veto power over all, even plausibly spending-related issues. Also how Reagan used OIRA to half-assedly control them. So here I asked Grok to explain the history of FDR's Bureau of the Budget. FDR's Bureau of the Budget was a pivotal institution in the evolution of U.S. federal budgeting and administrative practices. Here's an overview of its history. The Bureau of the Budget was established under FDR in 1939 through the Reorganization Act of 1939. This act was part of a broader effort to restructure the executive branch to manage the New Deal programs more effectively. The primary aim was to centralize budget preparation, which had previously been a decentralized process involving various departments and agencies. This centralization was intended to enhance control over federal expenditures, streamline government operations, and provide the president with a more coherent view of federal finances. Harold D. Smith was appointed as the first director of the Bureau of the Budget. His leadership was crucial in establishing the Bureau's roles and methodologies. The BOB was responsible for preparing the president's annual budget proposal to Congress. This involved reviewing the budget requests from all federal agencies, making recommendations on funding, and setting national fiscal policy in alignment with the president's objectives. Beyond budgeting, the BOB played a significant role in policy coordination across federal government. It helped in setting government-wide administrative standards and policies, including personnel management and procurement. During World War II, the BOB's responsibilities expanded significantly. It had to manage the massive wartime expenditures, coordinate defense and civilian priorities, and adapt to the urgent needs of wartime mobilization. After the war, the Bureau continued to grow in influence as the government tackled post-war Reconstruction, the Cold War, and domestic policy challenges like the Great Society programs. In 1970, under President Richard Nixon, the BOB was transformed into the Office of Management and Budget through another reorganization effort. This transformation was intended to give the president more control over both budget and management functions within the executive branch. The OMB would continue the legacy of the BOB, but with an expanded mandate to include not just budgeting, but also federal management oversight. And OMB, again, headed up by Russ Vought, one of the primary authors of Project 2025, the deputy director of OMB and acting director of OMB under Trump in Trump's first term, and now the current director. I encourage you to go listen to his conversation with Tucker Carlson recently. That'll give you a really good idea of what he's about. He is fully engaged in this Doge effort and will be coordinating with the Doge, which has been built and modeled after the ancestor to the Office of Management and Budget. The establishment of the BOB marked a significant shift from a fragmented to a centralized budgeting process, which has been a cornerstone of U.S. federal government governance ever since. Many of the practices and structures set by the BOB under FDR, like the systematic review of agency budgets, the integration of economic policy into budgeting, and the focus on performance and efficiency, are still evident in the operations of the OMB today. The Bureau of the Budget under FDR was not just about numbers and fiscal discipline, it was also about enhancing executive power, streamlining government operations, and aligning financial policy with broader national goals during a transformative era in American history. And I asked where can I read more about this subject, and it recommended a number of books here. So I put these on my reading list: some books, some online resources, academic journals, university libraries and archives, digital libraries. So I'm going to put the link to this Grok question here in the show notes on the King Pilled Substack. So if you want to go read more about this, here's some sources for that. Yeah, I can't help but just be heartened at how I don't know how do you say this? It's like the way that history is repeating itself. Yarvin has delineated this, and other people have as well, but Yarvin in particular, because he's the subject right now. He's delineated this, how you have these series of monarchs. We're going to get to this a little bit with our Yarvin and New York Times interview breakdown. There's these series of monarchs. FDR was the most recent one, and now Trump is basically coming in like an FDR-like character. He's bringing in all the startup bros, building massive infrastructure projects. And whether this is just sort of a kind of a spiritual phenomenon that just embodying the character, embodying the great man, the transformational leader, or because the people implementing his will here, the people who are informing a lot of this, providing the legal and the organizational basis for it, are students of the history of America and the federal government. But this Doge thing, I'm telling you guys, this is a top priority for the administration. It's not some sort of like just kind of throwaway thing that they're just like a token thing they're telling the base and they're not going to do anything about it. Everyone saw, oh, Doge is not an actual federal agency. It's just like an independent, and it's got a sunset to it and whatever. Like all of these things are pointing directly toward just how serious they are. And it's because they've got some extremely wealthy, powerful interests that are very interested in seeing them be successful with this. Jamie Dimon, the Jamie Dimon interview on CBS, he was like, oh, yeah, this is awesome. I've been wanting them to do something. I've been wanting the federal government to get a Department of Government Efficiency for a really long time, and they've got my full support. If anything, my concern is that they're going to be like too successful with it. And that's why I'm very interested in this software modernization that they're doing. And, the potential for backdoor, surveillance or that sort of thing. I don't think I'm not going to stop it. I'm not going to complain about it. It's inevitable. That sort of thing is going to come inevitably. I think complaining about it is silly. You just have to figure out how to live with it. But my concern with the Doge projects, if I have any concerns, are not that it's not going to be successful in pursuing its agenda. CyberChud 2077 says, Yarvin always comes off black pill, but the entire time he's trying to give us the solution, what actually worked before. I guess the incoming admin listened to him. Yes. And I've been telling you guys too, when you listen to him, you've got to read him sometimes as giving himself plausible deniability and playing devil's advocate. He's very Straussian in how he writes. So if you're just reading him, like taking what he's saying on his face, you're kind of missing what he's doing. His writing for him has always been a performance art. He obviously enjoys writing, and he goes out of his way to kind of dance with it. So like the things he's written directed toward Elon that are basically saying, yeah, unless you do this stuff, unless Elon decides that he's going to do this, 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 and this, he's obviously not serious about what he's doing. And he's not talking about doing this, 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 and this. So clearly he's not actually serious, and he's not going to actually accomplish anything. What that means is that when Elon starts doing it, then he's like, oh, wow, look at that. I was right. Or if something bad happens, he could just be like, I didn't tell him to do it. I'm not advising him. I just said this is what he should do. This is what he would do if he was serious. I didn't advocate for it. I just said this is what he would do. Amy says incoming, so we're about to get an Eastwood drop in. I hear some footsteps. Here they come. There he is. Hi, mister. What do you got? A machine?
Uh-huh. It can be a weeder and a hay cutter. This is the part that cuts hay.
That's the part that cuts hay?
Uh-huh.
What is the machine called?
When it's like this, a hay cutter. When it's like this, a weeder. Do you know why this needs to be on this when it's weeding?
Why?
So that this can stick underground under a weed.
And pop it up out of the ground?
Uh-huh.
Wow.
And then
What does it do with it?
it goes in a special type of tank.
Oh, really?
Daddy, can you use one of those?
Nope, not inside.
What are they?
You can take the tape measure downstairs with you if you want. But you got to take your machine with you too, okay? Are you getting ready to go to bed? I love you, big guy.
Daddy's letting me take his tape measure.
Give me a smooch. Thank you, man. I love you.
To your friends.
Okay, I'll give them a smooch too. Mwah. I love you, big guy. Have a good sleep, okay?
Have a good sleep. Wait, Daddy, what's in your spoon?
That's butter.
Can I have a little bit?
No. Love you, big guy.
Love you too, Daddy.
All right, appreciate you guys waiting along through that. Oh yeah, some king-pilled glasses. That would be, that's a very good idea. I don't know if you guys could hear what he was talking about, but he was explaining to me his machine that he has, and it's a hay cutter and also a weeder. And there was our I can't remember the name of the magnetiles. One of his favorite things to play with. Augie says bye-bye to Eastwood. Tell Augie hi. $20 super chat from Duffhead. Thank you, sir. He said, get the kid some sunnies. He does have some. He has some little blue ones, but he probably broke them. He did have some orange ones as well, and he broke them. He popped the lenses out and busted the little thing off of it. But we definitely need to get some king-pilled sunglasses. That's a very good idea. All right. Oh man, we're already at the 2-hour mark. All right, let's start talking about Marco Grande here. So this is from Bill Malugin. He's just highlighting this article from Real Clear Politics. This is where I saw it. New Secretary of State Marco Rubio sent a cable across the entire State Department, obtained by Philip Wegman at Real Clear Politics, which IDs illegal immigration as a priority, and says effective immediately, quote, this department will no longer undertake any activities that facilitate it or encourage it. Let's read. So this is from Real Clear Politics. Exclusive. Rubio outlines sweeping change in cable to U.S. diplomats worldwide. Shortly after taking the oath of office, Secretary of State Marco Rubio sent a cable to every U.S. diplomatic and consular post worldwide. The stark message from the new diplomat: sweeping changes are coming to a department that had mistakenly emphasized, quote, ideology over common sense and, quote, misread the world. The lengthy cable was sent shortly after Rubio arrived at his new post in Foggy Bottom and was obtained exclusively by Real Clear Politics. It signals a fundamental shift in foreign policy and a realignment of all diplomatic efforts towards putting American needs first. Toward this end, President Trump's new diplomat promised to focus on mass migration, terminate DEI policies within the department, end the, quote, censorship of the American people, end quote, and pursue, quote, energy dominance. Rubio was confirmed unanimously by the Senate the day before and is the first of Trump's cabinet nominees on the job. Previously, he was a senior senator from Florida and he served on the Foreign Relations Committee for more than a decade. He developed a reputation as a China hawk and a fierce critic of the neoliberal foreign policy consensus that emerged after the Cold War. So there's a link here, and we're going to click that link and come over here and check it out because this has some very interesting stuff in it, and I am now regretting having not followed him as closely over the past couple of years. So this one's titled, Rubio to release new book as longtime aide launches think tank. This is from June of 2023. War in Europe casts an ugly shadow over warm, glowing arches and also the predictions of one Thomas Friedman, who, writing for the New York Times, endorsed the thesis of Francis Fukuyama by famously predicting that, quote, no two countries that both have a McDonald's have ever fought against each other. But Moscow has McDonald's. So does Kiev. They imported American fast food, not liberal democracy. More than 100 Ukrainian franchises closed in a hurry when Russian tanks rolled across the border. A hungry China looks on, meanwhile, as the world grapples with a land war once thought impossible. The neoliberal dream, one defined by deregulated markets and unfettered global trade, the predominant vision of the last 3 decades of U.S. foreign policy, where civilized nations were supposed to litigate differences according to Western values, is all but dead. At least, so says Senator Marco Rubio. The idea that history has ended, he argues in a book set to be released next week, now needs to end itself. The less than cheerful title is Decades of Decadence: How Our Spoiled Elites Blew America's Inheritance of Liberty, Security, and Prosperity. In the latest on the ongoing evolution of Rubio, one that saw the Florida senator transform from a darling of the GOP establishment into a populist gadfly armed with policy, an intellectual and political progression aided, in large part, by his longtime chief of staff, Mike Needham. Keep an eye, remember this name here. We'll come back to him in a minute. Rare Clear Politics is first to report that Needham will leave Capitol Hill and, with Rubio's blessing, begin a new think tank to aid in that effort. In an interview with Real Clear Politics, Rubio condemned 3 decades of those elites for assuming that, quote, our country just wouldn't matter anymore. He rewinds the clock to at least 1990 when the Soviet Union was crumbling and the United States was on the eve of what the late Charles Krauthammer described as a unipolar moment. That's when, according to Rubio, another generation of America's, quote, best and brightest blew it. Quote, we started to make economic decisions not on the basis of what was best for America, but what was in the best interest of the global economy, the international order, and the world, he said. Washington and Wall Street became infatuated with globalization, ignoring or even selling out America, putting the country on what Rubio calls a, quote, road to slow and inevitable decline. Quote, we are all going to be citizens of the world, consumers and investors in a global economy, he said of that vision. Great power conflicts would become a thing of the past in a world of liberal or liberalizing nations wedded by markets. Quote, we'd be too happy with our cheap flat-screen TVs to be fighting wars. Televisions are thinner and cheaper too. A lot of other consumer goods are better, but the blessings of global markets haven't come without a cost. The way Rubio sees it, the dream of the 1990s has turned into a nightmare. America elevated enemies abroad, allowing China to get a seat at the World Trade Organization, hollowing out domestic industries in the process while casting aside traditional morals. The new Rubio book and the work he's done since his 2016 presidential bid are in some ways a more sober academic examination of what former President Donald Trump once described as American carnage. Rubio took Trump voters both seriously and literally when they expressed dissatisfaction with the old conservative orthodoxies. His project for the last half-decade has been to shape a new common good conservatism, one that's less beholden to free market pieties and global niceties. His focus, Rubio says, is instead on what benefits working people. He calls for policies such as overhauling the tax code to promote domestic manufacturing and better wages. The rare Republican in Congress, unafraid of tariffs and quotas, Rubio also calls for a stated industrial policy, not an unbridled free market, to prioritize investment in strategic sectors for American defense. To the old guard, this makes him an apostate. To others, he's a populist ideas man, an apostle of the new right. During the Tea Party era, he was the great right hope. But now, in the post, or perhaps intra-Trump era, there is one thing Rubio will not become anytime soon. The upper chamber, the senator said, is, quote, the place where I can be the most productive and effective at this moment in my life and at this moment in our country's history. And while the new book might read at times like the obligatory manifesto of a candidate for national office, Rubio, who won re-election by more than 1.2 million votes just 7 months ago, now sounds content to use, quote, the Senate as the place to push these ideas. He will not become a candidate in the 2024 presidential election. He believes he can do his best work in Congress. He'll be doing it with Mike Needham, Rubio's longtime chief of staff, helping him in a new outside role. When Needham first arrived in the Senate from his post at Heritage Action, a New York Times headline blared, Marco Rubio, darling of GOP establishment, hires a thorn in its side. The aide went on to work alongside the senator for half a decade as Rubio tore the curtain of GOP orthodoxy and began the work of updating old conservative principles for a more modern populist age. Quote, anybody with any curiosity coming out of the 2016 cycle saw a country that faces challenges which the traditional conservative policy agenda was not speaking to, Needham told RCP. New policy proposals on trade, manufacturing, and defense, quote, put some real policy meat on the bones of a new movement. Now Needham tells RCP that his new organization, America 2100, and this is where I sat up. America 2100, more on them in a second, will begin the work of codifying and institutionalizing the ideas Rubio helped pioneer. Quote, when people look back, the next 10 years will be decisive, Needham said of his mission, in determining whether America remains strong and China does not rise at our expense, or whether America becomes a vassal state of a more powerful Beijing. Rubio has blessed the effort and says that new institutions are necessary because all of Washington continues to act and debate issues, quote, as if it was 10 or 15 years ago in a unipolar world where America could do whatever it wanted and didn't have to make tough choices. He's become a reliable party gadfly, comfortably challenging status quos, albeit up to a point. Last November, Rubio was celebrating a double-digit victory. The GOP was coming to grips with a red wave that never was, and an ill-fated revolt was bubbling beneath the surface against Republican Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. Along with others, Rubio called for leadership elections to be delayed. McConnell won a re-election anyway, but despite his protest that the GOP needed to reprioritize in a hurry, Rubio doesn't have any interest in taking on Republican leadership. Quote, he has his focus instead on a general realignment of the Republican Party and the country, not climbing the leadership ladder. It's nascent, he said of a loose coalition that now includes the likes of Senators J.D. Vance of Ohio, Tom Cotton of Arkansas, and Josh Hawley, but it's bigger than it was 5 years ago, and it's growing. When Rubio was railing against China on the Senate floor, he admits feeling lonely. Now that sentiment is in vogue. His allies will argue it is because the senator has been frequently prescient. In February of 2019, Rubio released a mammoth report on China's blatant industrial espionage and coercion. Later that year, in a December speech on industrial policy, it was Rubio who warned about Chinese dominance of the supply chain that carry everything from chips to pharmaceuticals. The pandemic wouldn't bring that issue into focus until March 2020. In remarks that were canceled because of the pandemic, in the summer of that year, Rubio planned to discuss how deindustrialization, fueled by the neoliberal theory that expanding global markets are an unquestionable good, quote, bears down with particular force on black Americans. The next day, George Floyd was murdered. He was delayed but not deterred. George Floyd was not murdered. It was Rubio who led the charge against Amazon for removing the book When Harry Became Sally, responding to the transgender movement by conservative scholar Ryan Anderson. He warned Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos in a February 2021 letter that the decision to deplatform Anderson had, quote, weighty implications of the future of open discourse in the digital age. Conservatives have only grown angrier at what they see as censorship in the time since. Rubio sees a realignment, one that's happening beyond the halls of Congress. There's a fracture opening and now being laid bare in corporate America between neoliberalism and what he calls American Marxism. Quote, generally, what would protect you from hysteria is your institutions, your traditions, your foundations, Rubio said, before adding that some of that civil society, quote, had been destroyed by the policy decisions that were made on economics. When you basically send your factories and jobs overseas, those communities collapse, and there's nothing there to remind people of basic truths and reality. Many Fortune 500 companies, in his estimation, were happy to go along with progressive politics. It's protection money, basically, he said. The mob is going to show up and say, we will burn down your business if you don't pay us our monthly insurance. It's how Nike could condemn systemic racism in America while employing enslaved Uyghur Muslims in overseas sweatshops, he writes. Or why Coca-Cola turned a blind eye to Chinese humanitarian abuses while sponsoring the Beijing Olympics, but boycotting Georgia over its new voter laws. Again, he said, there's no attachment to country. Rubio doesn't believe he can get a CEO like Tim Cook of Apple or even Elon Musk to see themselves and their companies as American enterprises first and foremost. It's very funny. Remember, this is June of 2023. The adage, quote, what's good for General Motors is good for the country, won't be updated for Tesla, who built their gigafactory in Shanghai. Rubio has tried to put to paper the scope of the problem he sees. Quote, my focus is on what policymakers need to do about it, he said of his interactions with multinational corporations. Their obligation may be to their shareholders and making a return on investment for their company, but our obligation is to the United States. We face a massive test and one that I hope the Republican Party can begin to offer answers to, he said of his effort to convince conservatives to finally turn away from the old ways to confront the new, modern, existential threats that he sees. Now, remember, his chief of staff, longtime advisor, Mike Needham, left to found this new organization, America 2100. Now, the chief of staff is like, especially if you have a good one that sticks with you for a long time, the chief of staff can honestly be like the brains of the operation, where you have like the front-facing guy, the guy who's kind of like I know how to go out and communicate. I've got the name, the face. I've got the name recognition. I press the flesh. I do the stuff. You go do all the hard work and give me the things to say. And it could be completely cynical. It's just like, all right, how can I position myself to take advantage of this new rising coalition? What do they want? How can I give them what they want? And then this chief of staff leaves, and he was described as a thorn in the side of the establishment when he hired him from Heritage Action. He leaves and founds this new organization, America 2100, and Rubio has blessed the effort, says new institutions are necessary, and he's going to be beginning the work of codifying and institutionalizing the ideas Rubio helped pioneer. So this is like, oh, he's going to go off and do his own thing and we'll keep working together. No, this is like a planned, coordinated thing. All right, now, for the first step of the process, you're going to be my chief of staff. Once we get to a certain point, you're going to move on and you're going to found this organization for whatever purposes you want to found it for. I've been following America 2100 for a while now. Joined June of 2023 when that last article was written. This is America 2100. I had no clue this had any affiliation with Marco Rubio. The bio says, our ancestors settled a continent, conquered a wild frontier, built beautiful cities, and sent men to the moon. America deserves a future as great as its past. And I'm just going to scroll through the timeline here and you can see the tenor of it. This was the penned tweet Americans built the modern world. Our ancestors settled a continent, conquered a frontier, and sent men to the moon. But that American genius has been sold off for parts, piece by piece, over the past 50 years. This is a choice. It doesn't have to be this way. No sound, huh? Well, that's odd. I don't know why that would be. Let's, I guess, unshare and reshare. I didn't actually boomer tech it this time. It just didn't work. Let me know if it's working now.
Americans built the modern...
While I'm waiting for the sound to catch up, Josh Ham says, Marco sounds like a historical revisionist a la Daryl Cooper or Thomas. And he says, imagine that, a politician who listened to the voters who elected his rival over him and has evolved his positions to reflect the electorate. That's old school. Wonder if he listens to Martyr Maid. And Bryce says, I bet if you dug, you'd see that Rubio is connected to Teal. I bet Mike Needham is the piece. Your mind is exactly where mine went, and I'm going to be doing a little digging on that. And then Josh Ham says, you know what has successfully defended nations from Marxism? The same force that has cropped up every time communism has spread in European countries. And Rubio is seeing liberalism equals commie light. And Rubio's Cuban, isn't he? Is he Cuban or is he Puerto Rican? Born in Miami. Cuban. Yes. So he's very well aware of communism. Okay, we got soup back. Woohoo, we got soup.
modern world. Think for a second of any major invention, medical breakthrough, scientific discovery, or feat of human ingenuity over the past century. More likely than not, it had American fingerprints on it. When we talk about American greatness, we tend to talk about things like the Constitution or the Federalist Papers or our system of self-government. But our country has been shaped by something deeper, a creative boldness that has distinguished our people from the very beginning. America was shaped by a striving, restless, Faustian spirit that drove our pilgrims to the New World, our explorers to the Western frontier, and our astronauts to the moon. It's the same spirit that connected the world. First through the great steam engine, then through the power of flight. It's what gave birth to the telephone, the internet, skyscrapers, modern electricity, and the industrial assembly line. It raised up great cities. It defeated empires and rebuilt them in its own image. It tamed the wilderness of a new continent, and it shaped towering, larger-than-life heroes. George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, Henry Ford, Andrew Carnegie, the men whose names are etched in our history. It was here, in our country.
We're getting favorable references to the robber barons. And yes, I do agree, Josh, that voice does need to smoke more. He's going to talk about Faustian spirit, but I'll take what we can get so far.
That Western civilization achieved its destiny. America was not just a country that built things. It was the engine of world history. But the people who run our country have sold that American genius off for parts, piece by piece, over the past 50 years. We don't make things in this country like we used to. In 1955, manufacturing made up 38% of all non-agricultural US jobs. By 2019, that number had fallen to just 8%. We've offshored the middle-class jobs that used to be the backbone of our economy to the third world. And we now depend on hostile nations like China for many of our basic necessities. We no longer have the ability to build many of the things that we invented. They call this financialization, the process by which the financial sector, banks, private equity firms, hedge funds, and so on, takes control of a growing share of the economy and transforms American companies and trades into abstract widgets, numbers on a quarterly earnings sheet. It's turning us into a nation of paper pushers. This has made a small number of people fabulously rich. Wall Street bankers, hedge fund tycoons, and consultants at companies like McKinsey have made trillions from melting down brick and mortar businesses, shipping the jobs off to China, and consolidating whatever's left into multinational corporate conglomerates. But it is hollowing out our country. This was a choice. It still is. We do not need to...
I was just going to say that. Cyberchud says this is Pierre Patrick Buchanan. I was just going to say this sounds like Uncle Pat to me.
Continue down this road. It doesn't have to be this way. We can have the America we knew, but we need leaders who are courageous enough to fight for it again.
So this is a project that was sanctioned by the now Secretary of State. So scrolling down through here, we've got an Oren retweet. Look at the face of Americans murdered by illegal immigrants, you ghoul. Directed at this ghoul. We got a Nate Hotchman retweet. Nate Hotchman is actually part of the, he's the executive director. He's not, there's a district attorney of Los Angeles, has the exact same name, so he was getting blown up after the election because everyone thought he was them. Deport all illegal immigrants. Support 56%. New York Times poll. Signal boosting Stephen Limbaugh writing his symphony, which he's released his first couple parts, and I've got them on my list to go watch after the show here. He says, quoting him, "I'm going to write the symphony in the musical language that is quintessentially American. This is an incredible idea. The theme for America's 250th anniversary should be revival and restoration. A rebirth of the greatest American forms." Retweeting Martin, Jeremy Carl on the H-1B scam. Retweeting more from Nate Hotchman on the tech industrial complex that Joe Biden raged at. The revolving door between big tech and the Democratic Party. In 2019, Denmark underwent a paradigm shift on immigration. Their focus shift from integration to return to the countries of origin. This was done under a left-wing prime minister. More on mass deportations. Marco Rubio, this is the clip I played the other day talking about this, which I'm seeing in a whole new light now. Marco Rubio will shred globalists in his confirmation hearing opening remarks tomorrow. Border Patrol agents deporting illegals. It's morbidly funny to watch senators who support irreversible sex changes for teenagers suddenly become deeply concerned about the sanctity of marriage at Pete Hegseth's confirmation hearing. Extremely entertaining to watch them desperately try to redirect this scandal towards something that fits within the intersectional framework. It isn't immigrants, it's men, straight men. That's the real problem we should be talking about here. Haitian immigrants. The answer VP-elect J.D. Vance gives in this interview is actually deeply Thomistic, and I hope Catholics and those in positions of authority in the church are listening. Our number one responsibility is compassion to our fellow Americans. This is how companies take jobs from Americans and give them to foreigners. I could just keep going. Greenland leader says we are ready to talk with Trump about territory's future. Incredible things are happening. When they deploy fact checkers, that's when you know it's real. Mark Zuckerberg said that Facebook was loosening its speech restrictions and the entire press went into hysterics. Never forget how much they need internet censorship. Without it, they lose. I mean, this is basically our guys. Now, I'm not naive enough to say that that Marco Rubio is just like a crypto, a crypto Yarvin reader. But I also wouldn't be shocked. Seeing the sorts of circles he's running in, the type of rhetoric he's using now. I mean, he could just be getting this stuff from like Buchanan. But I'll also remind you that the director of policy for the State Department now is Michael Anton. Marco Grande indeed. I think we need to will him into following this track that he's headed down. And bros, I cannot... Is it like... Can you overdose on white pills? What's the threshold here? How much white pilling can I take before it gets dangerous? Because I'm getting I feel like I've got to be getting close. Like my feet aren't even touching the ground when I'm walking around. Andrew says, Trump just announced some tariffs for Europe. Europores. We love our Europore brethren. This is tough love. We're going to have to break the bonds that bind you down. We will liberate you. But first, we have to abuse your overlords. Can you... Going from the Marshall Plan to we're fucking putting tariffs on you guys. I'll look and see what the details are on all of this, and we'll talk about it on the show tomorrow. We're at 2:20. It's taken me longer to get through all of this than I expected, but let's keep doing. Let's keep going, and let's talk a little bit of Yarvin here. So this thread here is from Brian Chow. I don't know that I've seen him before. He's followed by some interesting people. Fighting for the Future at Aft Future, Alliance for the Future, Informed AI Optimism. He strikes me as a little bit of a lib. Just some of the ways he talks about in this, but I haven't dug into all of his background. But so I think this is an interesting kind of measured take on Yarvin from someone who would not necessarily be, our guy. He says, several of you have asked for my thoughts on Curtis Yarvin's New York Times interview. I thought it was a masterclass in a very specific kind of persuasion, disenchantment. I think that so many things are happening. Incredible things are happening. And they're happening so much that it's starting to get kind of hard to... It's getting hard to tell, like, what's a big deal and what's not a big deal. And once you start getting so many things that are such a big deal, then that very fact in itself can kind of make things a little bit less of a big deal, especially when you're talking about like public perception and the zeitgeist and everything. But the New York Times is interviewing Yarvin because they have to, not because they want to. This here is a response to Trump going on all the podcast bros. Now, we got to do it too. Who are we going to talk to? Well, let's talk to this Yarvin guy who seems to be like the magical wizard behind J.D. Vance. So they're not going to give him a fair shake, obviously, but you could tell in this conversation that this wasn't strictly about just get the worst quotes from Impossible and run a hit piece. They were actually trying to figure out, okay, like what do you think? What are you advocating for here? We need to take you seriously now. We can't just dismiss you and say, oh, you just said bad things about slavery or whatever. They're going to do that, but they're not reducing it to that. Like this guy here genuinely wants to know what he thinks because he suddenly found himself in the back seat. And is like, I need to know what you think because I need to know what's coming. And what this means is now New York Times readers are being exposed to Curtis Yarvin. And they're being exposed to him as the very fact that the New York Times is talking to him is granting legitimacy to anything that he says. This is submission. Duffet says, when Mark Andreessen says, my friend Curtis Yarvin, the New York Times knows its goose is cooked and their hand is forced. Yes, right. So here's the first clip.
I'm here in this building and I keep forgetting to make my best argument for monarchy, which is that people trust the New York Times more than any other source in the world. And how is the New York Times managed? It is a fifth generation hereditary absolute monarchy.
I cannot imagine how good it must have felt for him to say that in a podcast hosted by the New York Times. He's made this, any Yarvin readers have heard this so many times over the years. And he got his moment where he gets to sit down in the halls of the New York Times and tell them what they are directly to their face. This guy got real uncomfortable real fast. So he continues with the thread here. He says, the current moment is a moment of disenchantment for the left. Their narratives no longer sell, and their control of economic, media, and political institutions is on the decline. They are afraid. Here's an article from Ezra Klein. It says, now is the time of monsters. 4 trends are converging to make life much scarier. And this reminds me, I can't remember who it was that I heard say this recently, Where did I hear it? I was just listening to somebody talking about this, that the media is not, they've lost the ability to current thing anything. They cannot drive any narrative ever. They used to like pick a thing. Okay, this is now going to be the thing that everyone talks about now. They don't have that. They don't have that capacity whatsoever. They're completely reactive, just getting dragged along by the news cycle and desperately trying to cling hold to something as their entire coalition fractures. He says Curtis wants this disenchantment. He views it as his most important cultural victory within Silicon Valley. Demoralize the libs. And I'll add here, notice that he got a haircut. He's looking a little slimmer. He's got the leather jacket on, identifying him as a tech bro. And he's kind of leaning into this. He's really leaning into his Gen X, like, sort of like renegade. Like, I rode over here on my motorcycle. I got my leather jacket. I'm going to come up here and kind of, what's the word? Not simmer. Not seethe. I can't think of the word, but he's just kind of, he's got this sort of like dark mystique about him that he's trying to cultivate. And to someone who wasn't familiar with him or didn't know anything about him, he actually kind of pulls it off.
What they agree on is not a belief, but a disbelief. Basically, we don't worship these same gods. We do not sort of see, the New York Times and Harvard as like divinely inspired in any sense, or we do not see their procedures as ones that sort of always lead to truth and wisdom. We do not think that the way the U.S. government works, really works well or seems to be perfect in any respect.
And this absence of belief is what you call enlightened.
Yes. What they agree on is.
So, and this is where, brooding works. Yeah. I don't think that was the word I was looking for, but brooding it works really well. I know Yarvin is not nearly as in fashion as he used to be, but I've continued to appreciate him, especially because I see sometimes what he's doing, and also I don't have to like appreciate him to recognize who he is and the impact that he has. The number of very important people who take him very seriously and listen to him, and the fact that everything he's saying is bearing itself out, as we covered just a little bit ago with the Doge, and then the way that he knows how to speak their language. This is the thing everyone hates about Yarvin, is that they're like, oh, he's just a Jewish lib. He's an atheist, secular Jewish lib. And even his atheism and secularism has always been a little questionable for me. But the feature here is that he knows how to speak to them. He knows how to speak their language. He knows how to communicate with them. And in listening to this whole interview, which is very heavily edited, by the way, it's only like 45 minutes long, and the first, 40 minutes of it is in this environment, and then they do like a Zoom call for the last couple of comments, which is very odd. I don't know what the purpose was of that, but he putting myself in the mind of the lib. So like when he went on Charlie Kirk a year ago, everyone was like, what the fuck? Curtis Yarvin going on Charlie Kirk. A year later, he's on the New York Times. But when he went on Charlie Kirk, I listened to it. A bunch of other people I knew all listened to it. And all of us had the same reaction. Like, holy shit. All the boomer cons hearing Curtis Yarvin doing his Yarvin thing, but doing it in a way that appeals to the boomer cons. He knew how to tailor his message and speak to the boomer cons. He also knows how to tailor his message and speak to the New York Times audience, even though he's kind of getting cock-blocked throughout it by a soy boy interviewer. But at the very least, there's going to be plenty of normies, New York Times normies, very serious people, professional managerial class type people who aren't full TDS, who are going to be like, huh, he's actually kind of a smart guy. He like knows what he's talking about, and he didn't get to finish a lot of his thoughts. I want to hear more what he has to say. This interview is going to cause a bunch of Yarvin rabbit holes. Continuing with the thread here, he said, what's this guy's name? James Pogue. James Pogue's piece in Vanity Fair remains the best explainer on what the fault lines in that disenchantment look like? There are many. And this is a Vanity Fair piece. I think I read this on the show. If I didn't, I'm going to go look it up and read it. I know I read it, but I can't remember if I read it on the show. Inside the New Right, where Peter Thiel is placing his biggest bets. They're not MAGA, they're not QAnon. Curtis Yarvin and the rising right are crafting a different strain of conservative politics. The median, continuing with the thread, he says, the median New York Times reader is halfway through disenchantment. They're disenchanted about their political slogans, but not about their political systems. And Curtis is offering them a solution for their anxiety.
We just assume that our political science is superior to Aristotle's political science because our physics is superior to Aristotle's physics. What if that isn't so?
You're basically saying there's a historical and political recency bias that people are susceptible to.
Exactly.
To do that, Curtis challenges the political and historical myths of the left. Not in an angry way like Tucker Carlson or Daryl Cooper, but in a sympathetic way like J.D. Vance. I wouldn't necessarily characterize Tucker Carlson or Daryl Cooper as like angry critics vis-a-vis J.D. Vance, but this reveals kind of the biases. Like, this guy knows who Daryl Cooper is, but it kind of reveals his perspective, I think. And he's speaking for a perspective of someone who would ostensibly be closer to the New York Times perspective. One of Curtis's most important ideas is the importance, historical presence, and current presence of monarchy. It's as normal as a MacBook.
Isolated yet is why having a strong man figure would be better for people's lives.
I think that having an effective government and an efficient government is better for people's lives. That laptop was made by Apple, which is a monarchy, and it has a little thing on it that says designed in California and made in China.
Right. Yes, this is an example you use a lot where you say, and if Apple ran California, wouldn't that be much better run?
Whereas if your MacBook Pro was made by the California Department of Computing, you can only imagine it.
And this is how a lot of the interview goes, where this guy obviously has listened to a lot of Yarvin. He knows that Yarvin is extremely wordy, and just kind of cuts him off and tries to just condense his thoughts down and say them for him so he can get him to say other things. And he keeps accusing him of basically trying to like obfuscate. At one point, he says that I think all of the historical background you're giving is more obfuscatory than illuminating, which is like a fantastic thing for a journalist to say. Please don't give any of the context. Just give me a bullet point list of what you think. And just give me the sound bite that I want. Curtis argues that even Silicon Valley founders have this form of cognitive dissonance.
Your ideas, and I guess has been called like sort of a neo-reactionary cast of mind, are seemingly increasingly popular in the Silicon Valley world. Don't you think there's some level on which that world is responding to your ideas because you're just telling them what they want to hear?
Now, Elon tweeted the other day.
Now, that's honestly a good question. So this guy was a mixed bag. He's generally very, very. You can just tell in his physiognomy, his voice, his whole demeanor. He's very nervous and uncomfortable, and interrupting him a lot. But he also asked some genuinely good questions that struck me as like sincere questions. Not just gotcha questions, but like sincerely, like this is a sincere, legitimate critique of that issue.
Are seemingly increasingly popular in the Silicon Valley world. Don't you think there's some level on which that world is responding to your ideas because you're just telling them what they want to hear?
Now, Elon tweeted the other day.
Big cut.
He was like, the proper structure of government on Mars should be not just a democracy, but a direct democracy. Let me sort of examine the thinking behind Musk saying this, because I find it sort of extremely odd in a sense. Are the citizens of the Mars colony going to vote on like how to like replenish the oxygen supply or whatever? Like, no, of course not. The Mars colony that Elon establishes will be a subsidiary of SpaceX, and it will have someone in charge, and it will have a command hierarchy, just like SpaceX does. And so I'm like, Elon, when you say that this should be a democracy, what are the people voting on? And so there's this world of actually real governance that someone like Elon Musk lives in every day. And actually applying that world, applying that thinking to like, being like, oh, this is, this thinking is directly contradictory, in a sense, to the ideals that I was taught in this society, that's a really difficult cognitive dissonance problem, even if you're Elon Musk.
You know, when I hear you talk about the need for a monarch,
He says this comes at a time when the core question in the left-wing intelligentsia is state capacity, using government to accomplish things effectively. Another thing from Ezra Klein, what America needs is a liberalism that builds. This is from May of 2022. Right now, a cottage industry of left-wing think tanks, journalists, and policymakers have formed around state capacity. They believe Democrats can win if they successfully deliver on the government programs they promised. This is Abundance, Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson. The rise of the abundance faction. By working within a party, the new supply-siders can boost their cause and pull us away from left-right polarization. Roosevelt Institute. Building the government we need, a framework for democratic state capacity. Yes, Biden's green future could still happen under Trump. Someone with a non-American name and Robinson Meyer discuss how the decarbonization rollout can continue during the second Trump administration. If you're a listener to Mike Benz, you know what capacity is a euphemism for. The core conflict of the Democratic Party is whether they pursue solutions or emotion. While emotion was working well for them when Obama and Biden won, this was off the table. The reason why this context is so important is that Curtis draws out this emotion from his interviewer, a New York Times journalist who is disenchanted from the tactics of his movement, but not the slogans. I'll speed this up a little bit for Uncle Duff.
You're responding in this kind of cartoonish way to something that terrorism, which is, what is the difference between a terrorist and a freedom fighter? That's a really important question in 20th century history. To say that I'm going to have a strong opinion about this stuff without having an answer to that question, I think is really difficult and wrong.
now maybe you think,
And this part was born out of a conversation where he's doing the gotcha thing, where he reads Yarvin quotes on, what did Yarvin say? He said that the reason I'm not a white nationalist is because basically there's no utility in it. Everyone's lives got worse after the Civil War, including the slaves. And if you force me to choose between Anders Breivik and Nelson Mandela, like, I'm not going to do it. Basically drawing an equivalence to Nelson Mandela and Anders Breivik. And this guy does the pearl clutching thing. Oh, he shot lots of people. And Yarvin's like, Mandela was a terrorist. And so that's the context for him saying this. Like, what's the difference between a terrorist and a freedom fighter? And he's framing this in a way that the New York Times reader or listener in this disenchanted state is actually going to be more open to consuming and actually taking these sorts of questions seriously.
maybe you think, I haven't been red-pilled or whatever, or I'm not thinking through these issues enough. But I feel like, to me, you call it cartoonish. I call it very morally clear.
You're responding in this kind of
You call it cartoonish.
way.
I call it very morally clear. Curtis and the interviewer both get what they want. Curtis gets to be the sophisticated individual, and the New York Times journalist gets to be the everyman.
The early progressives, even like the pre-World War I progressives, you go back to, a book like, Drift and Mastery, are very...
I have to say, I find the depth of background information to be obfuscating rather than illuminating. But
how can I change that? How can I make that...
By answering the questions more directly and succinctly.
The early...
Yeah. I gotta admit, like, I enjoy Yarvin's speaking style. I enjoy all the rabbit trails. Like, when I'm sitting down listening to something, I want to sit and listen to something. Like, I'm not like tapping my watch. Like, give me the idea so I can get out of here. I want to sit down and listen to some interesting exposition on some sort of idea. I don't care if I agree with it or whatever. I just want to hear people talk about interesting things. And Yarvin absolutely talks about interesting things. I also thought this was a little revealing. Yarvin's reaction here, look at his face. When he says that, that hit a nerve with Yarvin. I think he strikes me as being a little sensitive to the idea that he's like long-winded or not clear enough. He bogs things down in too much detail or whatever. And he was honestly a pretty kind of a vulnerable moment. Like, how can I change that? Like, if you think that I'm just obfuscating here, and I'm trying to be honest, I'm trying to speak to you honestly and treat you like a person, and you're just accusing me of obfuscating, not illuminating. How can I change that? He doesn't. It would be really hard to watch this and come away with the perception that Yarvin is some like raving madman. Returning to Yarvin's questions, returning to Curtis's answers about race, regardless of whether you agree with his conclusion, he comes off as trying to substantiate them with facts and logic, and not just spewing emotions into the microphone. And this is available on YouTube. It's just on YouTube. It's not paywalled or anything.
You're saying there are historical examples in slave narrative where the freed slaves themselves expressed regret at having been freed. But this to me is another prime example of how you selectively read history, because if you read other slave narratives where they talk about the horrible brutality of it, so what?
And
there are some slave narratives.
And I say this,
how does that justify
made
anyone's life more pleasant? Difficult to argue that the Civil War made anyone's life more pleasant, including freed slaves. Their children were no longer sold out from under them.
When I said anyone, okay, first of all, when I said anyone, I was talking about a population group rather than individuals.
But are you seriously arguing that the era of slavery was somehow better than the era
of 1865 to 1875 was absolutely, and the war itself wasn't good either, but if you look at the living conditions for an African American in the South, they are absolutely at their nadir between 1865 and 1875. They are very, very bad, because basically this economic system has been disrupted.
But abolition was a necessary step to get through that period towards to make people free. Sure. Like, I can't believe I'm arguing
Brazil abolished slavery in the 1880s without a civil war. And so the thing is, when you look at basically, the cost of the war or the meaning of the war,
How many libs know that Brazil abolished slavery in the 1880s without a civil war? How many libs know anything about 1865 to 1875? And he's like, you might spurg about like, oh, who cares about the condition of black people or whatever. But a New York Times listener definitely cares, so he's framing this in a way that's going to be appealing to them.
Basically just like it just visited this huge amount of destruction.
The reason why these aesthetics are so important is that they're about disenchantment, Curtis's substance and goals, and his interviewer is sacrificing his own neutrality to make sure that doesn't happen. Even if Curtis loses a calm, mild-mannered debate about the cost of the Civil War, he's succeeded in disenchantment. The Civil War becomes like the 30 Years' War, historically important but not a political slogan. Even for conservative or Silicon Valley elites, this disenchantment is the goal. Disenchantment from the fraud of conservatism.
I think that American conservatism is in the long and very, very difficult grieving process of realizing that it has always been a fraud. And I think one of the especially dangers in American conservatism is that there's so much grift in it. And so much of it consumes so much energy and so much attention and produces so little. You are still a factor of 100 from being able to give the people who are voting for you and donating to you anything like what they imagine they're going to get from you. I think that American...
So he calls conservatism a fraud, and specifically on the grounds that when people vote, they don't get what they're voting for. And he's within the context of the rest of the conversation where they're talking about democracy. The democracy is weak. That it's fraudulent, essentially. This is the basis for it, which is a very good everyman message. Because every single person, the libs especially, are feeling this right now. The libs hated the Biden administration. So they're hearing this like, when I vote, I don't ever get what I want. And this radical conservative, super scary guy is saying conservatism is a fraud and that people, when they vote, they don't get what they want. There's a disconnect between the politicians and the people. And this goes back to Yarvin's thing where he says, like he compares democracy and politics. And he says, if you were to say, we need to get the democracy out of such and such, people would freak out. But if you said, get the politics out of it, people would be like, oh, yeah. He's like, what's the difference? Duffhead says, say what you will about Kurt. I certainly have my own opinions, but it's an actual fact that none of us would be here doing this without him. Yes, exactly. Exactly. Every single one of you MFers has been influenced by Curtis Yarvin. And you wouldn't be here listening to me I wouldn't be here talking about this if it wasn't for Curtis Yarvin. What does it say that the left is more animated about the Civil War or even about some Norwegian terrorist than getting to Mars? And what does it say about the right? At the end of the interview, the host returns to the question of democracy.
Still find myself deeply unconvinced about is sort of why blowing up democracy rather than trying to make it better would somehow lead to better lives for the people who are struggling the most.
Which, again, is another honest question. Like, that's a legitimate question from him. He's like, I'm willing for you to give me an answer here that is compelling to me. Please give me a compelling answer. I don't like, he's trapped in his little world here. And what do you have for me? The thread continues. The following part of Curtis's answer is most important.
If there's really one thing that I kind of want to do the most, say, with this conversation, is to kind of make people feel like they can basically step outside of the kind of very small box that they grew up in.
Thank you to the New York Times, which is honest and good, for publishing this interview. There's the picture. There's that brooding look. I'd encourage you to go listen to it just to see the interplay between him and the interviewer. Someone here said, was it Bryce, I think, said, I feel like Yarvin is just poor man's American Putin when in an interview. That's a really good comparison. And Yarvin himself makes that comparison right at the start of it because he asks him a question about democracy. And Yarvin says, well, so when Washington came in, Washington, and the guy stops him and he says, I feel like I just asked you, like, what did you have for breakfast this morning? And you're about to tell me about like the history of wheat. And I think it was Yarvin said, yeah, I'm doing the Putin thing, aren't I? But Andrew says, Yarvin is a necessary phase for getting over liberalism. Yes. Right. Yes. The thing about the New York Times listener is that the way that Yarvin talks, the way he communicates, all the things that drive, I was going to say drive us. He doesn't drive me crazy. I disagree with him on a number of things, and I'm skeptical about his motivations, but he doesn't drive me crazy. That he does drive a lot of our guys crazy. But the thing is, the reason he drives our guys crazy is because he's too New York Times. The New York Times listener is absolutely primed. As soon as they get past the, ooh, he's scary and he says bad things, impulse, if they start getting disenchanted and they're like, okay, give me something else interesting, give me something stimulating, he's going to provide them very stimulating material. Someone who's subscribed to the New York Times sits down and reads incredibly boring things all the time. Very long-winded breakdowns of this thing or that thing. They pride themselves in, I'm a New York Times subscriber. I read the news. And the way he's framed in this whole conversation, even with the hit piece aspect of it, is this is an interesting guy with the ear of powerful people who has interesting things to say, and it's safe to listen to him. We're watching the New York Times engage in the process of desacralizing democracy. That's the takeaway. By them platforming him and having this conversation and having it in the way that they did, they are actively desacralizing democracy for their own readers, whether they intend to or not. That's the effect of it. Slosher, $5 Canadian, says, do you think a lot of people are having PTSD from their worldview shattered when it took us years to come to the same conclusions about power? I absolutely think that that's the case. And I've advocated for patience with some of these people because they are, thank you for the super chat. They're speed running this arc that many of us, like you said, took years to go through. And now they're having it rubbed in their face and they're having to go through it really, really fast. Okay. Let me real quick, because we're coming up on the 3-hour mark, I'm going to drop off a couple of these things. We'll touch on them another time. Make sure they're bookmarked so I have them saved for later. Last two things. First of all, I saw someone reference a Persian rug merchant earlier. Academic Agent says, were any golden ages in the past declared before they happened? Genuine question. Everyone's been saying it's a new golden age, and the question here is it actually, can it be a golden age if you're declaring it up front, or are golden ages recognized either in the middle of it or retrospectively? And Martyrmaid says, all of them. Golden ages are a state of mind, something a society literally talks itself into. If enough people think they're in a golden age, they're in one. This might be the most important thing that you'll hear this year. If enough people think they're in a golden age, they're in one. This is why we do not black pill. Because it is a matter of fact that we can will ourselves into a golden age. This is the power of the human mind and the collective human will. We will bludgeon you into a golden age. You will accept it. You'll be thrown out of the tribe if you do not accept the golden age. We will create a golden age by simply manifesting it with our minds and willing it into reality. Ultimately, like, all the financial markets, prices, value, all of this stuff is entirely contingent upon human perspective. Something is valuable because people believe it's valuable. Value is subjective. So nothing has intrinsic value. If someone's talking about something having intrinsic value, they're signaling that they don't understand the world around them. Nothing has intrinsic value. Value is not a property that exists independently in a thing, separate from a human observer. Value exists because someone values something. So that thing could be completely worthless, and people value it, which makes it not worthless, by definition. So the golden age is here. We are living in a golden age. Begin acting like you're in a golden age. Assume you're in a golden age. Relate to the world around you as if you're in a golden age. And it will be true. Simply because you believe it is. This is the power of the human mind. Josh Ham says, vibes run the economy and world. You can doubt this, but then Stormy will track you down with remote viewing. That's right. The Stargate program has been reignited. Get in, fag. We're starting a new golden age. That's right. Oh, great. Andrew says, I just had a hilarious image of a bunch of New York Times readers pouring into the comments section on Matt's old live readings of Moldbug. Pray for him. His comment section is about to experience a 50 IQ point drop. Oh, no. I didn't think about this. Quick, delete them all. Oh, well. Better they come to us than we've got the best comment section. We've got the best live chat. So better that they come here than go anywhere else. Let me just check the last couple of comments here. Oh my goodness, Simon the Amputee. Thank you, man. $50 super chat. Coming in strong. Hope you're doing well, man. I haven't seen you in a little while. Hope everything's going well. Hopefully you're enjoying the golden age. You should come around more often. All right, well, oh, actually, no. 1 second. Got one last thing. Got to leave you with a little something wholesome. The Russian cathedral finished construction in 2020 and is a true symbol of what modern builders can achieve when given the funds to build something extraordinary. The cathedral holds controversy for several reasons. However, we're here to see the vast spectacle this building has become, and is quite shocking. The floors, doors, and other metal components are made from melted steel of German tanks from the Second World War. The cathedral itself is built in memory of Soviet soldiers lost in the Second World War in accordance with the 75th anniversary of the Allied victory. To see a modern cathedral is something unlike anything else, truly remarkable. This is from This Norway Guy is the one of the video. Let me refresh it because Instagram is stupid. absolutely stunning. Hope I get to go see it someday. I would really like to go see it. Maybe we'll plan a king-pilled adventure, and we'll go see the Russian cathedral, and we'll see the Romanian national cathedral. That'll be our first king-pilled field trip. Yeah, Trump issued an executive order to make public buildings more beautiful. Let's use this as a model. We must uplift our spirits. Josh Ham says, those Soviets were still men defending their motherland. The citizens are not responsible for the failures of the king. Right. These were not men. These were not communists. This cathedral isn't built for communists. This cathedral is built for the victims of communism. The men who died for their country may have been sent to their death by communists, but they weren't communists. They didn't deserve that death. And yeah, Jason says it's not to honor communists, it's to honor the army. Prayers for the Russian military are standard in Russian Orthodox prayers. All right. That's all I got for you guys today. Keeping it just under the 3-hour mark. I appreciate all you guys showing up. We are at 95 likes. We can get to 100 before it ends, because I'm going to give you guys Hulk now. Follow me on Twitter at RealKingPilled. Go to kingpilled.com. Sign up for the Kingpilled Discord. Come join us. We'll be doing another Schizo stream this week. We've got a lot of content backing up for the Schizo streams now, so we'll be set for a little bit. And if you'd like to support, along with the Genuous Super Chat... Genuous? What the hell is that? Generous Super Chatters today, then you can... Wow, you guys popped it right over 100 fast. Thank you. There's links in the description to the Buy Me a Coffee, buymeacoffee.com/kingpilled, and also a Cash App. Or you can go to, if you're following me on Twitter, you can go to Twitter, go to my profile, and there's a tip button there where you can send Bitcoin or Venmo. Duffhead says, stop being poor and join the Discord. That's right. In this golden age, we aren't poor. We join the Discord. All right, love y'all. I will see you tomorrow with another episode of the Astrolabe. And I leave you with Hulk.
When they took a shot at my hero, and they tried to kill the next president of the United States, enough was enough. And I said, let Trumpomania run wild, brother. Let Trumpomania rule again. Let Trumpomania make America great again.